Disculpen la demora, es un gusto para nosotros dar comienzo a Life Science Inside Real Estate, un nuevo evento multiplataforma que busca integrar a las principales empresas asociadas a ciencias de la vida junto a expertos y profesionales de diferentes ramas en un espacio donde compartirán conocimientos y experiencias. Este evento está organizado por la revista Inversión Inmobiliaria. Hemos organizado esta jornada con el apoyo de Cochol Free Zone, La Lima Free Zone and Business Park, JLL, y nuestros guía partners son La República, Inbound Logistic Latam, Site Selection Magazine, Institutional Partner, Asofras, CINDE, ASFA, Asociación de Zonas Francas de las Américas. Nos encantará conocer sus impresiones del evento en redes sociales. Life Science será nuestro hashtag para seguir sus opiniones. Esta jornada tendrá algunos contenidos en inglés y otros en español y como dinámica comenzaremos con la apertura del evento. Tendremos una sesión durante la mañana hasta las 12 horas de Costa Rica y luego continuaremos a la 1:45 p.m. Durante la sesión de la mañana disfrutaremos 2 paneles conformados por los mayores expertos del sector y 2 keynote speakers destacados. Los temas que trataremos luego de nuestra apertura son competitividad y experiencia país, Latinoamérica, el nuevo hub de la industria de ciencias de la vida y el caso de éxito de Costa Rica. Desde hace varios años, Latinoamérica se ha posicionado en un lugar de privilegio para la industria de ciencias de la vida y los nuevos tiempos ponen de relieve su importancia para la estrategia del sector. Descubriremos en este panel por qué la región se está convirtiendo en hub del sector y qué ofrecen los países latinos a los grandes jugadores internacionales. Además, conoceremos el caso de éxito de Costa Rica y qué puede esperar la industria local en el futuro cercano. Luego, Site Selection, estrategia de ubicación en la nueva normalidad, cómo seleccionar las instalaciones correctas para sus operaciones, seleccionar instalaciones que se adapten a las necesidades de la industria de Life Science ante la nueva normalidad es un paso clave para el futuro del sector. En este panel discutiremos cuáles son los factores que determinan el éxito de la selección de un site, las últimas tendencias en la nueva normalidad y los distintos tipos de contratos flexibles que se pueden negociar. Asimismo, descubriremos qué buscan las empresas internacionales y cuáles son las bases para negociar su establecimiento. Conoceremos de mano de los expertos globales los elementos indispensables y las experiencias exitosas en Costa Rica. A continuación, Robert Hess, Vice Chairman de Global Corporate Service de la empresa Newmark, nos hablará sobre ciencias de la vida, una perspectiva de competitividad global. La industria de las ciencias de la vida se ha convertido en una prioridad para muchas comunidades, ya que sigue siendo un importante motor económico en todo el mundo. En un sector de alto impacto, con grandes inversiones en investigación, trabajos bien remunerados e innovación que se produce a un rápido ritmo. Basándose en más de 30 años de experiencia en la selección de sitios a nivel mundial, Bob Hess explorará los diversos segmentos dentro de la industria, las oportunidades potenciales y los factores que impulsan proyectos de selección de sitios de ciencias biológicas competitivos. Luego, para terminar el capítulo de la mañana, en la sala principal, el doctor Fernando Llorca, embajador de Costa Rica ante los Estados Unidos de América, nos hablará sobre las posibilidades de hacer investigación biomédica, incluido en equipo médico en Costa Rica. Luego haremos un receso hasta la 1:45 de Costa Rica, donde retornaremos con 3 paneles más. Durante el receso contarán con actividades complementarias en salas paralelas a cargo de nuestros sponsors. Uno de ellos será el workshop de La Lima sobre Cartago, un nuevo polo de atracción de inversión extranjera al este de Costa Rica que trabaja de la mano con aliados estratégicos, como fortalecer el vínculo entre el sector empresarial, académico y gubernamental para favorecer de COYOL, dispositivos médicos 4.0, la nueva generación de dispositivos disruptivos. Las tecnologías disruptivas en un mundo paciente-céntrico sistema de historias de éxito. ¿Cuál ha sido el secreto de Costa Rica para posicionarse como líder en el sector de ciencias de la vida? Conoceremos de primera mano cómo empresas multinacionales, suplidores, desarrolladores, academia y gobierno han hecho de esta industria una de las más exitosas de los últimos tiempos. En este panel conoceremos casos de éxito en operaciones, recursos humanos, facilities, gobiernos y en la academia. A continuación, ciencias de la vida y real estate, cómo sacar ventaja de la estrategia de real estate para optimizar espacios físicos en la nueva normalidad. Ahora más que nunca, su estrategia de real estate puede ayudar a optimizar su infraestructura y espacios físicos. Acompaña a consultores, expertos y empresarios y maximice su tasa inmobiliaria. Y Supply Chain, nuestro siguiente panel, cadena de suministros en la industria médica global, estado actual, retos y oportunidades. ¿Qué nuevas oportunidades destacan para los encadenamientos de la industria médica global? ¿Cómo puede el sector potenciar su cadena de suministro? ¿Son las condiciones correctas para darle continuidad a su desarrollo? Bien, luego de esto, una última actividad complementaria en nuestra sala paralela a cargo de JLL, Outsourcing Life Science Effectivity, Quality and Cost Saving Model. El Facility Management busca la eficiencia y eficacia en la oferta de servicios para instalaciones de un amplio espectro de organizaciones. Será un formato de taller donde identificarán los retos y oportunidades en el área de Facilities y Integrate Facility Management para los diferentes actores del sector de Life Science. Ahora bien, basta ya de contarles el resto de nuestra jornada, vamos a darle comienzo formal a esta actividad. Les presentamos el video de Life Science y la introducción, las palabras del señor Hernán Fred publisher de la revista Inversión Inmobiliaria, organizador de este evento. Vamos con ellos.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Hernán Frer, director de la revista Inversión Inmobiliaria, que como muchos conocen, es una revista que nace hace más de 5 años como la única revista de negocios inmobiliarios en la región y con el propósito de impulsar la inversión y desarrollo de los bienes raíces comerciales. Hoy me complace darle la más cordial bienvenida al primer evento de Ciencias de la Vida que organiza nuestro medio. Desde antes de la pandemia, considerábamos al sector de LifeSciences como uno de los más dinámicos y con mayor potencial de crecimiento, pero a raíz del COVID se ha convertido en un sector estrella. Como tal, merece que juntos exploremos las necesidades específicas que tiene para catapultar aún más su crecimiento y agilizar su operación. Además, buscamos explorar las oportunidades existentes para todos los servicios conexos, desde la investigación y desarrollo hasta el tema que nos convoca, que es el real estate. Para nadie es un secreto que el sector inmobiliario ha sido sumamente afectado por la pandemia, pero también los tiempos de crisis obligan a adoptar una nueva visión y un nuevo enfoque. Esperamos que este evento los inspire, los estimule y motive a eso, y que juntos identifiquemos cómo potenciar todas las esferas del sector de ciencias de la vida en Costa Rica y Latinoamérica. Agradecemos profundamente a todos los expertos que se suman hoy al evento, así como a los patrocinadores, sin los cuales esta actividad no sería posible. Esperamos que sea la primera de muchas y les deseo que la conferencia sea productiva e interesante para ustedes. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Hernán. Escuchamos ahora las palabras de apertura del señor Carlos Wong, presidente de ASOFRAS, Asociación de Zonas Francas de Costa Rica.
Buenos días y muchas gracias a Inversión Inmobiliaria por permitirnos compartir con ustedes durante este día y esta mañana. El régimen de zona franca ha sido un régimen muy importante, no solo para la industria de ciencias de la vida, sino para Costa Rica. Durante los últimos 5 años, las exportaciones del sistema de zona franca en Costa Rica han venido creciendo en cerca de un 29%, lo cual demuestra el dinamismo del sector de zonas francas. En particular, las exportaciones solo de bienes han crecido cerca de un 23% en ese periodo y servicios un 27%. Es decir, es un sector no solo robusto, sino diversificado. Y uno de los grandes temas que nos venimos a plantear hoy es lo que ha pasado con el sistema de vida dentro de francas. Desde 2019, las exportaciones de bienes en zona franca representaron el 53% de las exportaciones del país y las de servicios representaron cerca del 50% del total exportado. Dentro de estos sectores, ciencias de la vida es el sector más dinámico. De ahí que este seminario reviste de gran importancia, no solo por la participación del sistema de ciencias de la vida entre las exportaciones totales del país, sino por la importancia del mismo. Costa Rica pasó de una empresa allá por 1980, donde arranca Baxter con la primera empresa de ciencias de la vida en Costa Rica, a ser un sistema muy robusto que supera las 60 empresas hoy en día y cuyas exportaciones son hoy el principal producto de exportación de Costa Rica. Una posición muy importante en la cual no solo el valor de las exportaciones ha estado sobre la mesa, sino también el valor agregado que las mismas generan y el empleo que este sector aporta al país, dando por lo tanto una gran integración con la economía nacional y creando los pasos para uno de los clústeres más sólidos en los cuales opera Costa Rica. Bajo eso, les damos la mejor bienvenida a este seminario y esperamos que hoy sea un día de gran discusión, de gran aporte para todos ustedes y que puedan tener un seminario muy satisfactorio. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad. Les deseamos lo mejor para el día. Gracias.
Muchas gracias por tus palabras, Carlos. Ha sido un placer escucharte. Vamos a dar comienzo entonces a nuestra agenda. El primer panel del día conversará sobre Latinoamérica, el nuevo hub de la industria de ciencias de la vida y el caso de éxito de Costa Rica. Desde hace varios años, Latinoamérica se ha posicionado en un lugar de privilegio para la industria de ciencias de la vida y los retadores nuevos tiempos ponen de relieve su importancia para la estrategia del sector. Descubriremos en este panel por qué la región se está convirtiendo en hub de esta industria y qué ofrecen los países latinos a los grandes jugadores internacionales. Además, conoceremos el caso de éxito de Costa Rica y qué puede esperar la industria local en un futuro cercano. Nuestros speakers son Pilar Madrigal, directora de asesoría de inversión en CINDE, Michael Tucci, President and CEO en Microtechnology, y Juan José Chacón Quirós, CEO and Founder en Establishment Lab. Pilar, bienvenida. Vamos a disfrutar de algunas palabras tuyas para comenzar. Pilar se unió a CINDE en 1998 y durante sus 22 años de carrera en CINDE ha sido fundamental en el desarrollo de estrategias, actividades y programas para promover la inversión extranjera directa en Costa Rica. Antes de unirse allí, Pilar fue tercera secretaria de Naciones Unidas, periodo en el que Costa Rica ocupó tanto la presidencia del Grupo de los 77, G77, como el Consejo de Seguridad de Naciones Unidas. Pilar estudió marketing en la Universidad Internacional de las Américas. Vamos a escuchar entonces tu presentación y luego compartir las opiniones sobre la temática entre los tres speakers. Bienvenida, Pilar. Bien, confirmamos si tenemos... Ok, Pilar tenía un problema de conexión, así que vamos a darle unos segunditos para que pueda recuperarse y volver a conectarse con nosotros, cosas que pasan en los eventos virtuales. En un momento estamos con ustedes y les daremos la bienvenida a Pilar. Bueno, podemos en todo caso, si no, introducir, si tenemos problemas de conexión, a Juan José y Michael. Entiendo, Juan José, que tenías, si estás ahí conectado, tenías también algo para compartir para iniciar el panel.
Sí, buenos días a todos los que nos están y como quizás mucha gente no conoce de nuestra empresa y de nuestra historia, entonces queríamos compartirles un pequeño video sobre las particularidades de nuestro propósito y de nuestra razón de ser como empresa en las ciencias de la vida.
And like many of the world's greatest companies, we started in a garage. Years later, we have now grown into a global company, presence in over 70 countries around the world. And even though we began in humble origins, our vision and mission allowed us to focus on the future, allowing us to push the scope of what we thought was possible, not just for us, but for women everywhere. We wanted to change the game, to revolutionize the industry, to make a difference in a world that needs something new. And with the creation of a new generation of aesthetic products, we did just that. We changed everything for women everywhere. Since the very beginning, women have always been at the center of everything we do. And as a women's health company, we strive to work with innovation and science to make our patients feel safer. Establishment Labs, a women's health company.
Entonces, quizás, no sé si quieren que me refiera un poco a lo que hacemos, pero básicamente nosotros estamos dedicados a lo que es ¿verdad? La salud de la mujer, y como tal hacemos una serie de soluciones para cirugía mamaria, tanto cirugía estética como cirugía reconstructiva, y estos productos incluyen soluciones como implantes mamarios, sistemas 3D, hacemos también sistemas de reutilización de grasa para hacer tejido autólogo como parte de estos procedimientos, y seguimos innovando. Acabamos de sacar al mercado nuevos tipos de productos para reconstrucción mamaria que van a poder cambiar los protocolos y traer mayor seguridad a mujeres en este tipo de procedimientos.
Buenos días, ¿me escuchan?
Sí.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, I apologize. We're having a little bit here of connection issues, and I'm going to turn a little bit to English because to the sake of Michael, Juan Jose and Michael, always a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for having my back, just in case we have any more issues here in the connection. If we can start showcasing some of the information that I wanted to project here. And so what we're trying to do today, Costa Rica really has become a hub for life-centered solutions. So if you want to move to the next one. What's happening today is that companies are, in fact, facing kind of a new challenge. Companies need to work in a collaborative to really maximize personalization in all aspects of healthcare. So they have to integrate all their data sources. They have to develop more, I would say, client-centric solutions. They also have to seek for greater efficiency. And in that sense, at the end of the day, they will maximize personalization. So if you want to move into the next slide. So this is where we come. And this is where we say, so companies, are you thinking about doing this integration transition at all costs? Or do you really want to do it in the best way? So we truly believe that we can go hand in hand to help them achieve a comprehensive, sustainable solution for their growth. Everybody wants to grow smarter. Everybody wants to grow better. So what about growing together with us, moving forward? Nicolas? So today, what we wanted to talk to you about for everybody that here is joining us is that we are going to focus in Costa Rica, particularly under 3 P's: people, planet, and prosperity. And it's really a concentration of an environment that will immediately help Costa Rica become the life center hub of the Americas, which we already are very much in the midst of becoming. So if you, Nico, if you want to move on. So why do we say this? Because as part of what Carlos was saying at the very beginning, what do? We export health. We today, as you know, we have 9 of the world's top 20 global OEMs. They join 70 other companies that have operations in the country. We export almost, well, $3.7 billion in 2019 in MedTech. And we are projecting that to grow. We really do believe by that 2021, we will be projecting $5 billion in medtech. So if you want to move forward. Where are these products going? They're really accessing global markets. Today, we have 15 trade agreements. We access 2.8 billion people through any preferential treatment. That's 75% of the world GDP.
Bien, Irene está con algunos problemas de conexión. Vamos a darle unos segundos para que intente volver a conectarse.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Yes. So Nico, if you want to move to the next one, please. So we have, for putting context, 29 of the Fortune 100 medical devices in Costa Rica. Other than those, in general, we have attracted more than 300 multinationals that do have operations, and they're currently expanding a lot of them. And that has turned into not only a hub for manufacturing, but really a growing ecosystem for startups. I think, quite frankly, our vision of the world is clearly to continue doing this in a much more sustainable and promoting impact FDI. So Nico, if you want to move the next one. We today produce products in 14 different subsectors of the life sciences industry. And here you can see all of them. They employ over 60,000 people in the industry. And we continue to help them through this process of reimagination and re-engineering, clearly to advantage all the new environment that's being developed because of the current pandemic. So if you want to move on. We have become the technological epicenter for medtech and manufacturing. We export, we were the first, precision and medical equipment was the first export since 2018. We are the second largest exporter of medical devices in Latin America. We mentioned about the presence of world-renowned companies. We are the first one in human capital. The exports have been growing. They grew 12.3%. From 2018 to 2019. We are the first in digital skills among population in Latin America. Our output of STEM graduates is absolutely astounding. It's 156 STEM graduates per 100,000 people compared to the US, which is 172 per 100,000 people. So you can see there what's been our focus into developing a STEM pool of workforce. We have 16, and we're going to talk about this a little later, 16 of the top global tech leaders also that have chosen Costa Rica as their site to support globally. And as I mentioned there, a numerous amount of Fortune 100 and 500 companies in the country. So Nico, if you want to move forward. So remember, we talked about those three P's at the very beginning. Let's start with prosperity. So we define and we believe Costa Rica can definitely be that partner for that complete and I would say enterprise-wide transformation, as it says there, right? It's not only a piece of the business, but that is that entire transformation. And why? One, because there is an already established collaborative ecosystem in the country. We have IT, as I mentioned, we have biotech, we have smart manufacturing, and clearly life sciences. And they all meet within a small amount of kilometers and a very small area in the world. We also have a dynamic environment for R&D. And most interestingly is, and you'll see, I mentioned about the IT here, we are already embedded in the digital revolution. We're going to see, we are seeing companies already doing AI, analytics, automation, software. And so we can definitely help the companies embrace this transformation and achieve prosperity in Costa Rica. So Nico, if you want to move forward. This is the convergence. There are megatrends taking place already. I mentioned there's already 3D printing. I think we heard from some of the companies before me. There's IoT, there's robotic process automation in the digital tech. There is cloud computing companies that are providing products and services from Costa Rica to the companies and worldwide. So there's all this is really happening within our 50,000 square kilometers in our country. So if you want to move forward, Nico. Thank you. So now let's talk about the next P. It's people. And if there's a constant, I believe, is that every company that has come to Costa Rica and continues to grow, they do talk about the people and the quality of the people. We have the platform. We have no standing army, and clearly then that has allowed us to invest in health and education. As you can see there, 7.3% of our GDP in education, 9.9% of GDP in health. We have the oldest democracy in Latin America. Education is free and mandatory. We are working very, very hard on retooling and reskilling a talent platform, seeing that works every day in with strong alliances with the academia and international academia to promote this upskilling. We have a very tech savvy and digital ready. We have among the highest mobile penetration in Latin America. And we believe that Costa Ricans are very creative. They're young, they're innovation driven, but I'm going to leave that for my colleagues later on to talk about that. So Nico, if you want to move on. We really are there. We have 60 universities, I mentioned. We have 129% of mobile penetration and almost 87% of internet penetration. So the people, the platform there is definitely goes hand in hand with the capabilities of our country. So Nico, if you want to continue. This is what some of the other organizations say about us. Clearly, we can talk about a lot about Costa Rica, but we rely on what these other indexes say. We are the first ones in skills of current and of the future, according to the World Economic Forum. Clearly, number one in digital skills, as I mentioned, according to the Global Competitiveness Report, and number one in English proficiency in Latin America, according to the ETS. So overall, we rank today number one in human capital in Latin America. Nico, if you want to move. So now let's talk about planet. And to me, and I'm hoping that to you and to everyone here going through these times, this really becomes a priority. But it has been a priority for Costa Rica for many, many years. 99% of the electricity comes from renewable sources. 52% of the national territories is covered by forests. We reversed deforestation, actually, one of the only countries that has ever done that. We hold 6% of the world's biodiversity in our small country. We ran in 2018 on 300 consecutive days on clean energy. We are home to one of the blue zones, as I say here. It's a place worth visiting. We were named world's first champion on the earth by United Nations. The country has a clear decarbonization plan to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And we are home to more than 20 RE100 companies. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide, Nico. So these are the 3 Ps. Costa Rica is the platform for talent development. We are aligned to what companies need. We are retooling. We are educating. We're investing in current and future skills. We are committed with the planet. We are committed to sustainability. We're committed to the growth and equality. And we have an environment for prosperity. It is a technologically enabled environment. It's a collaborative environment for prosperity. This is a Life Center hub. We have the data. Carlos was talking about that. We have the track record, but we really have those 3 aligned Ps that I believe makes Costa Rica a unique place where to grow and continue to contribute to life as a Life Center hub. Nico? Thank you. I'm happy that I was able to share this with you. I also wanted to thank Revista Inversión Inmobiliaria for inviting us today. I hope this is useful since it has a lot of information for anybody that wants to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to share all of our stories, all of the success stories, and clearly any data that you need to make any decisions about Costa Rica. But now I have the pleasure to have again Juan Jose and Michael. So Nico, if you want to bring them back, happy to see them. We have Juan Jose in the tropics, so everybody can enjoy the birds and the sea in the back. So right now, I am going to give the floor to Juan Jose. Juan Jose, if you can, I think we have a beautiful video. Please introduce yourself. I know you talked a little bit, but I think you're going to talk a little bit about your video, okay?
I think showed the video, the previous one.
That's Michael.
Oh, so that's
Michael's video.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael, then your video.
Our video? Sure. This is a real estate gathering, so here we show our real estate. I'm starting a facility here in Coyol area. Took us a few years to build it, but we've been in here about 18 months. It's a little unique where we have no internal construction. It's one giant controlled environment room where we're doing a variety of manufacturing services. There's the metal components, both stamping, we're doing insert molding here, micro machining, you name it. It's a veritable supermarket of production capabilities within a relatively small space. Get into a little bit about our view on technology and how it's changing literally everything we're doing. I'll just give you an overview of what we look like down here. Great. Chloe, you want me to continue?
Yes, please. Talk a little bit about you, the company, your trajectory.
Sure. So we are celebrating our 20th year down here in Costa Rica. I can't believe it. I was a young man when I got here. But as you saw in our video, Micro is a precision manufacturer that also does a lot of design work for med device, as well as automotive and other critical industries such as aerospace, things like that. Things that need to keep you alive are generally what we excel at. We work exclusively with industry leaders across those markets to provide them a reliable niche partner for manufacturing. Med device for us is one of our newer ones. We've only been in it about 15 years, as opposed to 30 or 40 in some of those other industries. But we've learned a lot in how we can help bring this industry forward. We really focus on three attributes that we think can be of the most benefit to the industry. Pilar's nice slide there with all of the wonderful new technologies that are coming out, particularly that one in the middle called AI. They all sound great, but actually being able to put them into what we do today is really where we're spending almost all of our free bandwidth. So we're on a mission to make most everything you see in today's med device supply chain obsolete. We're starting with the idea of putting the uniform companies out of business with all those rows of beautiful white coats you see in most manufacturing companies, through a very aggressive plan towards robotics, that we have our own standardized modular, what will soon to be robotics as a service platform that we're launching our first one right now that's taking, I think, 28 of those lab coats and turning them into 2 with a whole bunch of robots that are also doing machine learning. That's probably the one part of AI that we see short term, next 12 months, deployable out on the factory floor. Up in the office and in the design teams, AI is taking a more aggressive approach, where we're seeing design optimization for product, particularly when you talk about additive manufacturing and the ability to use what's called generative design to understand what we know about structural designs, mechanical designs on the head, and make most of what we're and in the larger ecosystem, we're also looking at how do we make all of these transactional jobs obsolete from the office side, right? So a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to understand and in some cases guess a little bit of what they need, where, and when, as far as supply chain. So we're right now about halfway through a transformative process where we will just let our computers do the work for our clients, so they can get on to doing the more strategic, beneficial things that they need to do. So that's a lot of transformation. And again, that is mostly being driven by our young engineering team here in Costa Rica. The next pillar we focus on is peace of mind, right? It's great to come up with all these amazing ideas, but you need to be able to be extraordinarily reliable, extraordinarily consistent, and have quality that is, in most of our clients' eyes, literally perfect. So obviously the AI and the robotics play a really big part there as well, but also a choice of place. Right? So as we decided to invest in this nice big factory here in Costa Rica, I remember back when Pilar and I talked 20 years ago, it was honestly about cost. We needed to get out of the US. But the last go around was really much more about stability. And I think that's where we're seeing Costa Rica really come into its own on the global stage now, as the US-China friction has caused a lot of OEMs to realize exactly how many eggs are in that basket. And then you add in a little bit of a pandemic and some political instabilities in other, what we call usual suspects, right? Such as our neighbors to the north for reshoring or offshoring opportunities. So we see Costa Rica as a really, really opportune place. We just happen to be in the right place at the right time with about 20 years of practice. And the third one, which also plays into both of those, is lowest total cost of ownership. And we're seeing more industries now. Automotive has been there for quite some time. Med device is getting there. And aerospace is on a little bit of vacation right now. But I think to your point earlier, Pilar, about growing sustainably, being smart, not just cheap or looking at the wrong metrics around growth. So we see Costa Rica, we see our facility here, we see our people here tied to the right technologies, equating to how we measure lowest total cost of ownership, which means when we launch something, we do it right the first time. There's no 3 or 4 loops. When we transfer a program, which is what we're seeing actually a lot of right now, there's a lot that gets lost in translation, and we're able to leverage both technology and smart people to make sure that gets done once and done right. And at the end of it, you have a very safe and stable system, that a geographic system that we participate in here in Costa Rica, where we can predict inflation. We can, well, COVID notwithstanding, predict on inflation, and other things that make this a very good place for us to play the long game, which is really what we focus on. So we're looking forward to the next 20 years down here. I'm not sure what the factory is going to look like then, but it's going to be a very interesting ride.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for showcasing how old we are and today. So that is true. Actually, that is true. I remember clearly walking into your facility here in Long Island 20 years ago. And it struck me, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what I saw there, and how impressed I was. I have to say, your dad, he is a legend. I think he is. He was he had a very well-established business. He was very proud of what he had achieved, and yet he had this young boy who had a vision, and he was a game changer. He was somebody that had an idea that things needed to move forward. And this was 20 years ago. And so we sat down. There was a lot of back and forth, convincing. We seen that we did our job. You did our job with your dad and with the rest of your vision. And then you are here 20 years ago, and your dad's still there 20 years later. What has been the constant? What has been that? What do you tell him today about Costa Rica, about where you are, where you want to be? That has been the constant through those years.
Sure. Well, I can start by saying what's changed, right? So initially it was insert labor rate here, right? Back when we were making those discussions, and all those check the box prerequisites for where to offshore something as a U.S. company in the mid to late 90s. And as I mentioned, the next reinvestment, the big up, I think we expanded about 8 times here over 20 years, but this obviously was our largest one. Cost was no longer really a factor. It's not the cheapest place to manufacture anymore, but stability became much more important. And I think really, if I look back and I look forward, that's the one thread that I think that we have here that we can't find literally anywhere in the world, right? You can't find it in the EU today. You can't find it in the US. You definitely can't find it in most of Asia. So when I say we play the long game, it's true, right? When we do investments, we look at 3 to 4 years. When we train people, we look even longer. What's their 5-year growth plan with us for development? I think the content is changing dramatically, right? So as we just talked recently, it really is about finding imaginative people, finding creative people with good education that no longer are worried about limits. And that's, to me, the biggest exciting part of what comes next in our journey here in Costa Rica. But we know that underlying that is consistency, is stability, is confidence that all the crazy stuff we come up with is still routed in some engineering discipline and sound concepts, and we have a solid footing here from which to launch things around the world. So I think that really has been the one thing I haven't seen change, which in today's world is becoming a rare commodity.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you. I am looking forward also to seeing that next 20 years of transformation. And with you up there, I have to say that I'm excited about what you have in your vision next, and looking forward to continue working with you. So, Michael, thank you. Juan Jose, are you with us still? There you go. Thank you.
Hi.
So Juan Jose, with you is another amazing story, right? I think everybody saw your video, and this is a kind of a different situation. This is you, a Costa Rican, an embedded Costa Rican with an incredible mind, with an idea that starts in a garage with a couple of people, and start thinking about a product, and move forward. And here we are. I remember that NASDAQ building in New York, the energy of your IPO, the day of your IPO, the team, that all of a sudden, that realization that everything that you dreaming about when you put that first computer in your garage was there. All of it was there. You were the first Latin American in NASDAQ company, because of your vision and because of your team's help through all these years. But next to you were those investors, the people that actually helped you finance all this growth, and how they were trusting you and your team and your mind and your vision, but somehow they were also trusting Costa Rica, right? Because they needed, I believe they were trusting Costa Rica. About let's look at Costa Rica from that point of view, from the point of view of where they find these companies, how do they trust them, why did they trust you and Costa Rica, and why all of a sudden you were there in this amazing floor and launching the future of Establishment Lab.
Yeah, that was an amazing day. I have to think is that investors look for companies that, of course, are going to create value for them. But within that, purpose is so important. And, a lot of the times you hear that investors don't care about these things. They care about them very much. And in our case, we had a vision that we could transform an industry that had been plagued by a lot of legacy problems. When you think about breast surgery and aesthetic breast surgery and breast implants, for most people, there's a certain degree of, I would say, lack of trust in this industry, given the history behind it. And we said, well, there's a reason for this. There's been a lack of investment in this indication. There's been a lack of investment in the technology to make it happen. But most importantly, there's been no angle of women's health. And that's what got that industry into trouble. So we said, if we have that angle of women's health, then we can start fixing many of the things that they got wrong over the years. So when we went to market in 2010, we went to market with a product that was extremely different from what everyone was used to at that time. For instance, in terms of the surface of that implant, it had what is now called a nano surface. At the time, people were asking us, what are you trying to do? This makes no sense. Texture devices are better. And years later, these devices, these texture devices are in most of the world. So it's very interesting that we are, looking at a story of a Costa Rican company, but also a Costa Rican company that believed that that purpose would differentiate the whole story. And when we think about it, the first few years after we went to market, several times really being very close to shutting down our doors because of lack of capital. And eventually, we are able to get more investors involved. And, I have to say that, yes, I think the one of the things that, the group of investors that eventually took us to become a publicly traded company, one of the things that really impacted them when they first visited our first plant in Costa Rica was what they called a pride of ownership. They felt like these Costa Rican employees felt like this was their company, that they were so proud of the things that they were doing. And I do believe that that's so important. And some of the best things that we get in Costa Rica is that you have a group of employees that are fundamentally part of the company's purpose, of the company's, thriving culture towards, for instance, things like quality and efficiency and things that are important in manufacturing. But also, throughout this time, we've also been able to make that push to be present directly with our own commercial operations in many countries around the world. So when you think about our investors, and most of them these days are in the US, yes, they love the fact that they're part of a story of a company that is transforming an industry, that is trying to bring women's health to this industry. But also they know and they like the fact that we are the first from Costa Rica that went to NASDAQ. And we continue talking about all the great things that you showed earlier today. We are very proud to be based in Costa Rica, and we hope that, with our next facility, we show that commitment to the country. So, of course, I do believe investors about these stories. And even today that you're also getting investors who are, more careful about investing in companies that care about the environment, that care about, social issues, that care about governance. I think that is going to be important as we go forward.
Perfect. Hi, Juan Jose. It's always so enlightening to hear your words, your experience. Over and over and over again, we talk about your success story, and I'm very happy that you have joined us today. These are, so for the audience, these are two different stories, right? We have Michael Tucci, Microtechnologies, they're a private company, and then we have Establishment Lab, Juan Jose, a publicly traded company today. They are two success stories, and as you can see from what they're talking, they are committed, and they have been committed to that proposition that we make to companies. It's about people, about the pride of ownership, as Juan Jose said. It is about prosperity, how really companies are looking for a purpose. And it's about planet, right? It's about being in tune with what we need in the healthcare industry and how really they represent that through their manufacturing. Again, for being with us, thanking for sharing the story. It is, again, I believe that we all together, seeing that with you and with the rest of the companies that are part of that ecosystem, we're ready to continue growing, and we're ready to continue making you, hopefully helping you, making you more successful. And of course, for any other that is out there that wants to talk to any of these gentlemen, please just let us know. We'll be happy to help. So with that, Juan Jose, Michael, thanks so much. Deborah, back to you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Pilar, por tu intervención. Ha sido un placer escucharte. Tenemos algunas preguntas que hemos recibido de los asistentes, te las vamos a compartir en todo caso por privado para tu conocimiento. Muchas gracias por tu tiempo. Bien, antes...
Un día me voy a quedar oyendo el evento porque tienen unos rockstars aquí de panelistas, así que aquí voy a estar al pendiente y muchas gracias a ustedes en verdad.
Muy bien, te esperamos entonces. Antes de continuar con nuestro próximo panel, le agradecemos su participación a nuestro sponsor Coyol Free Zone. Ya estamos listos para continuar con nuestra segunda actividad del día y escuchar sus reflexiones sobre Site Selection, estrategia de ubicación en la nueva normalidad, cómo seleccionar las instalaciones correctas para sus operaciones. Seleccionar instalaciones que se adapten a las necesidades de la industria de Life Science ante la nueva normalidad es un paso clave para el futuro del sector. En este panel discutiremos cuáles son los factores que determinan el éxito de la selección de un site, las últimas tendencias en la nueva normalidad y los distintos tipos de contratos flexibles que se pueden negociar. Asimismo, descubriremos qué buscan las empresas internacionales y cuáles son las bases para negociar su establecimiento. Conoceremos de mano de los expertos globales los elementos indispensables y las experiencias exitosas en Costa Rica. Para ello nos acompañan Álvaro Goicochea, gerente de asesoría de inversión en CINDE, Carlos Wong, director general de Coyol Free Zone, Margaret Rose, Regional Director de Conway Data Inc., y nuestro moderador, el señor Luis Torres Acosta, America CRM Latam Regional Life Science Director de Operaciones en GLL. Luis Torres Acosta es ingeniero registrado y corredor de bienes raíces, cuenta con una maestría en Ingeniería de Gestión y Manufactura. También es miembro activo de ISPE, exdirector, ASME, expresidente, AYE y de Puerto Rico Manufactured Association, director asociado regional de Metro, miembro de ICSC, Consejo Internacional de Centros Comerciales, y profesional certificado de GXP. Actualmente es líder regional en LATAM para la práctica empresarial centrada en las ciencias de la vida de JLL. En esta función proporciona orientación y liderazgo para la ejecución eficiente de las operaciones de cierre. Antes de unirse a JLL, Luis pasó años trabajando con fabricación de alta tecnología y hospitales y proporcionando asesoramiento sobre aseguramiento de la calidad, regulación y cumplimiento y mejoras en los sistemas de las instalaciones. También asesoró a funcionarios del gobierno de Puerto Rico en propuestas económicas que se convirtieron en ley. Luis, bienvenido. Un gusto tenerte con nosotros.
Gracias, muy amable. Gracias por la introducción.
Por favor, te dejamos con tu panel para comenzar.
Seguro. Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos a este segundo panel. Como parte de nuestro panel y la intervención de nuestra audiencia internacional, pues continuaremos en inglés. Welcome everyone to the second forum, the second panel, regards to the insight on the real estate based on the life sciences. As we mentioned before, our panel today on this time, it's about how we work with the site selecting, the different points that we have to be working out now with the new normal, the strategic planning, how we pursue, and how we look into the future as well. Joining me today, we have great panelists for the industry, both from international, also from Costa Rica. Let me introduce them very quickly, as I would like you to know them as well as to know their background. We have with us Margaret Rose from US. She's the Regional Director of Conway Data. She's also a publisher for the Site Selecting magazine. She has worked in many economic development initiatives through the years, more than 10 years of experience in North America, including recruiting and incorporation of the industrial sector to the market initiatives. Welcome, Margaret, this morning to the forum. Well, I got Margaret and introducing. Sure thing. When I got Margaret, can you give me a quick introduction of what site selecting for the folks that probably doesn't know?
Can you say that one more time? I'm so sorry.
Can you give us a quick introduction of what the Site Selecting magazine about?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Site Selection magazine is actually a global publication. The majority of our subscribers are C-suite execs who are actively looking to relocate and expand. And the publication really gives insight, a comprehensive view of actionable insight for those that are looking for corporate industrial expansion.
Thank you very much. In addition with us, we have Carlos Juan. Most of our folks in Costa Rica definitely know him. He's the managing director for Coyote Free Zone. He's also the chairman of the Free Zone Association of Costa Rica. He's a former promoter, director of promotion for the Asia Pacific Regional for CINDE. We'll talk more about CINDE, and more than 20 years experience in development and promotion and promoting the Free Zone and the industrial part. Welcome, Carlos, to the forum. Also, taking the opportunity, would you also give us an idea or a thought about, what's the Free Zone all about?
Well, thank you, Luis, for the introduction, and a pleasure to share with Margaret and with Alvaro this panel. First of all, Coyote Free Zone has been nominated as the best free zone in Latin America, number 7 in the world, and highly commended for medical devices industry. Our free zone is really recognized by having 7 of the top 30 medical devices companies in the world operating in Coyote, and with a total generation for 16,000 new jobs. I think it's one of the most outstanding free zones in the region.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. Welcome again. And then, not the less, Alvaro Goicochea. Welcome, Alvaro. It's one of our investor advisors and managers for CINDE. He also works on strategic planning and attraction of foreign direct investors to Costa Rica. He's responsible for the partnership and enabling business cases, assessment, and opportunities to bring to Costa Rica, and definitely an access to the industry for more than 16 years in financial and business analyst experience. Welcome, Alvaro. Can you tell us about CIMDE? Because that's an interesting point, as I can compare those to other local markets like Prico, like Florida Enterprise, New York Enterprise. Could you give us a more idea what CIMDE does?
Sure, absolutely. And again, Luis, thanks for the introduction, and likewise with everyone, thanks for sharing this time. So basically, CIMDE is the investment promotion agency for Costa Rica. We're focused, of course, on the attraction of foreign direct investment into the country. One point which is important, we are a private organization. We are a non-for-profit organization, and as well an apolitical organization. Therefore, that gives us a flexibility to be able to work with the local market and as well with the government, but with an actual ease of doing the business. And recently we've been recognized as, been recognized as the top investment promotion agency. And we do so by trying to become a partner with the companies and supporting them through the investment life cycle, from the installation all throughout the process afterwards and growth phases. So again, thanks for having me here.
Great, Alvaro, thank you. So as you can all see, we have a great panelist into the team, from the investment standpoint, from the technology standpoint, for the local focus into what are we doing in Costa Rica and the needs and what's going on throughout the process of the new normal, the new exciting, changes throughout the industry and the life sciences. So with further, delays, I want to go to specific areas and questions that I want to, throw at the panelists so to see their feedback and their experience. Let me start by Margaret. With the 2020 being such a disruptive year for the industry in general, I mean, do you think that the driving factors of selecting a site have changed? If they change, how you think it's being perceived nowadays?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, my first thought is, how could it not change? With everything that COVID-19 has presented to people this year, there have been a number of industries that have not been as resilient as the life sciences industry. But when you really take a step back, one of the things that came to mind first was the type of companies that need clinical trial space. That could have a different outcome now when looking for a site. They may not need as much space as they did before. And a perfect example of that is something that actually one of our editors wrote about in our July issue. Gary Daughters wrote about a company called Evidation. It's a Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical company that partnered with Apple to really explore what the Heartline study app on the iPhone and the heart health capabilities of an Apple Watch, how those could help prevent health risks in individuals. And instead of needing a space for them to perform clinical trials and do something like that, they were able to use an app-based approach and enroll participants immediately and then study that data that way. So when you look at that, then you've got a change in the amount of space that someone may need. So absolutely, the things that people are looking for in sites has definitely been impacted.
And when we look at that, I mean, how does the magazine, intervene in regards to do their research? I mean, how do they actually add more data for those who actually got into the site selecting magazine and some other, tools to identify, what are the points that they're going to look into it when they look at these changes?
Yeah, how are we sharing that information?
Yes.
Or how are we obtaining it? Yeah, so we have a fantastic editorial staff at Conway. We also have offices across the world in Germany, in Shanghai. And so basically you could say that we have people working around the clock, quite literally. And we also have a fantastic database that we have kept over decades that we've been around, and we're about to go into year 67 of publishing. And so we really have a very talented team that is conducting interviews. We have AI intelligence that we use to pull press releases and information off the internet and keep track of all those things that are going on. And then we're able to compile that into our publication 6 times a year. So really, I would just give all the credit to the editorial staff and our data team at Conway.
Super, excellent. So Alvaro, now going to you in regards to the same subject. I mean, being a promoter, being a strategist, how you perceive the investors actually use that information? How you perceive investors actually saying, are the change affecting me? And how you work that out with them?
Sure, perfect. And I think in that sense, I would categorize the answer in two ways. One would be thinking on the short term and how that has actually affected the companies, and also on the long term. On the short term, I would probably say that the supply chain and how it has been evolving into a more agile supply chain is very important. And by more agile, I mean that it's going to be focused on the proximity to the final customer. That's really important right now. Those are one of the things that actually have been a game changer. As well, the risk mitigation is something which is now in the top of the mind of all the executives. And by risk mitigation, you could focus it on the expansion of the capacity and the redundancy that you have with the supply chains instead of having that lean supply chain as we did before. So that is important. Related to that topic, of course, is going to be the scalability and the quick ramp up that you can do to be able to take advantage of that shift in the supply chain. And as well on the reconversion of the facilities you could have to be able to quickly change your product lines or quickly introduce new product lines into your facilities. That with the short term. And with the long term, I think most of the things have remained relatively stable. I would probably say that the focus on the stability of the environment in which you're going to make an investment is extremely important. Therefore, the country stability, the business environment, and as well the maturity of that cluster, especially for the life sciences companies, is extremely important. Talent, of course, talent and the track record that you would be able to showcase on upskilling and reskilling that talent is as well something that has remained and will continue to do so in the long term. And something which is as well important for us at Cinde and that we've been focusing is with the prosperity and the planet and the people. Those are the type of combination of items that we think are going to drive on the long term and are going to be the ones that are making the companies more successful or not, focusing on the people, the planet, and the prosperity.
You brought an interesting point in regards to the supply chain environment. Nowadays, again, with the disrupted year that we have had, how does Costa Rica in this case scenario has dealt with it? Because, by closing the ports, by closing the airports, by coordinating some activities, the supply chain, as you mentioned, is very critical. In the case of course, in Costa Rica, you might have, far more than the shipping or through airplanes. You have also the carriers throughout, Central America. So how you guys has managed that? Because it becomes an element of, supply chain, regards to stocking, regards to, warehousing and some other areas. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, sure. And that's a very good point. And of course, here, the word is business continuity. To be able to focus and to adapt now with the disruption of the supply chain, the key is the business continuity. And for that, Costa Rica has been able to adapt really quickly to the necessities of the pandemic and be able to make sure that we adjust to the health requirements and the conditions in which you have to manage the pandemic, but as well make sure that the business continue working normally with the least disruption possible. And that, I think the parks as well have played a key role working with the government and us to be able to be that intervene in the middle and be able to get those solutions quickly. So I think Costa Rica was able to adapt, and basically 98%, 99% of the companies were able to continue their work despite the pandemic through the work from home, or the ones that had to keep their plants up and running. We were able to adjust and have that production ongoing. So those are the type of things that you would see in Costa Rica with the business continuity.
Thank you. And Carlos, based on your experience, I mean, looking now as more from the operational standpoint, as a professional guiding the 3 zones and so on and so forth, Carlos. I mean, in that case, what you should say is the real estate industry priorities now, with the life science company. How do they actually be able, with everything that's going on, attract industries as work with the ones on hand to maintain the operation running on a daily basis, Carlos?
The industry has proven in this pandemic that there are certain elements that are critical for attracting foreign investment. Number one has been the business continuity. Costa Rica has proven that the cooperation between the private sector, India, and the government has allowed the prison companies to operate continuously during this pandemic. So it allowed the companies to move not only the cargo, but also the people, which is very important. So the companies were able to adjust either by doing work from home or either by allowing and moving the people through their transportation networks to the operations. And that, joined with the location of Costa Rica, which we can definitely call Costa Rica a near-shore facility, allowed definitely that Costa Rica has been in a very good position, not only to continue doing business under the life sciences industry and under the free zones, but also being well positioned for the future in terms of continue attracting new businesses based on those principles of business continuity, flexibility at the workplace, and also on the reliability of the free zone systems and security of the free zone incentives in Costa Rica.
So in regards to, the side thing, because that's to maintain operating the flexibility, the knowledge that not to shut down, but actually, maintain the capabilities of the existing sites. What about the part of selecting a new site? As an industry I have already might say, you know what, convince me that, the new normal, the new life science industry is still no more than the regular previous normal, as we might say it. It was what you just stated. But the new normal, I mean, how do they actually look at today? Okay, I have what I need to invest in Costa Rica. I need what I, my investment is going to have a good return of a good ROI return regards, bringing more industry. So that's site selecting, expanding opportunity. How do they perceive that, the existing companies that you're dealing with?
Well, number one, you have to choose a country that proves its business continuity. Second, you have to work with a developer that will provide services and adapt its services to the needs of the pandemic. In the case of Coyol, we started by not only working with the government in terms of the continuity, but allowing the companies to be defined as a strategic sector for Costa Rica, but also with the transportation system of Coyol, which is working in order to sterilize all the different buses, to apply all the COVID prevention measures together, not only as a park, but also with the companies, and to work and provide solutions that are needed on a day-to-day. We monitor what's going on in terms of the COVID. We provide not only logistic support to our companies, but also medical support, and expanded our medical conditions and facilities, but also working with the communities to help the communities to work around the pandemic by offering different things like donations of equipment, like donation of masks, by donation of medicines and different supplies that are needed in order to work the pandemic, the COVID pandemic.
Okay. And Margaret, looking into, what Álvaro has shared in regards to how the industry is behaving, how the supply chain is behaving, Carlos sharing, what it's from the operational standpoint, things happening and their priorities. When we look into the strategic marketing effort to actually bring industries to still being strong, rely on the industry that's still strong, and it's a matter of just a momentum that we're going to go through, but we're going to come back again through it. What's been the priority on the market initiatives? What's been the approach when we talk about, these markets, the life sciences?
Yeah, so I've had several clients that is an industry that they are looking to recruit. And one of the things that I've had them focus on is their talent and their workforce. And I know that's something that Costa Rica has an incredible leg up on is their life sciences talent. But, you know, no matter what industry you're in, what company you are, you can, you know, relocate to a country, but if you don't, or another state or another city, another region, but if you do not have access to the qualified talent that you need, then it's not going to do you any good. And so I've really had my clients really focus on partnerships that maybe they have between their workforce development boards, their higher educational institutions, even K through 12 programs that are going on, and really being open-minded about partnering with companies that are already there to develop new programs that'll also be applicable to other industries coming in. And so really it comes down to talent and workforce.
Great, thank you. Alvaro, going back to you, and I think this is going it's floating very good, because we're looking at different points, as we stated before, how the market is engaging, how the investment is engaging, the activities from a operational standpoint. But looking now more in detail to the COVID, which has been, you know, the primary issue, other than, you know, the disrupted in general, but the COVID itself, you know, what you think has been, you know, the true support that the country has given to the industry, and how that's worked out?
Sure, perfect. One of the examples that we touch upon, but I'll focus on afterwards, of course, is the business continuity. But another point has been the part of education and how we can reskill, adapt, and upskill as well our existing talent. I think that's one of the key things that we've been able to accomplish through this crisis, not only from a government standpoint, from CINDE standpoint, but as well from the company's standpoint, because the collaboration has been really important in that sense. Through an example like this is we've been able to create a scholarship program with Coursera, in which we provided 50,000 scholarships for people to be able to upskill and reskill and be able to position themselves into the jobs that the companies have been actually increasing during the times of COVID. And this is one of the things that have actually put us in the map of saying you have the talent and you have the availability to ramp up quickly, because you're going to have programs that are going to be tailored to your needs and be those quick wins to be able to get that talent and then ramp up in a better way. So that is one of the things as well. I think one thing that has been consistent throughout Costa Rica has been the access to the different markets, and that has been through the free trade agreements. This has been something that companies have taken advantage of, because again, it goes back to the reshuffling of the supply chain and how can we mitigate that risk through the access through different areas. So the free trade agreements and access to different markets has been one of the key things as well. And not to touch upon that again, but I think business continuity as well has been one of the focus, and that has been messages that the companies and the managers have actually been given from the C-levels across the globes, in which Costa Rica has handled the situation quite well. Actually, other locations haven't been able to cope as fast and as quick as Costa Rica, and that actually has put us in a very good position. So I think those are the things. And this is summed up by a word, which I would probably say is resilience. And that's one thing that has characterized the talent and the Costa Ricans in general, is our resilience to be able to adapt to the needs. And when the bar is risen, I think that's when we step up and give our best. So the resilience would be the word to sum it up.
Thank you. And Carlos has been impacted when we look into the continuity of the business and with the COVID-19. You know, we know that we have some rules of engagement, both from the individual standpoint and both from the social standpoint. We talk about distance between people. We talk about using the mask. We talk about washing our hands, and the different steps that we have to take care of it on the individual basis. But also it gets related to, our environment, our working environment. And that has impacted big time in regards to the real estate and how we are maximizing our space, how we're actually, optimizing what we need to do without distracting, as we stated before, the operation. So when we talk about that, we talk about it's an extra spend of money, an additional investment that takes place. How you guys have been managing that? Because it's an impact in regards to the operation, even though it's due to the disruption of the COVID this year. But how you guys have been managing that? What's been the approach to comply not only with the regulations on the individual level, but with the companies making changes? Space and distancing, coordination with processes, coordination new stations for cleaning, coordination new entry levels for which we can continue having a healthy environment.
Yes, that's one of the issues that been affecting the companies in Costa Rica and all over the world. It's not only a situation in Costa Rica, but happens all over the world. Every company has been required to comply with the COVID standards. So that means that from the very basic transportation line needs to reduce its capacity. So we have to double our transportation number of buses. We have also to install entry controls at the park, at every company, that controls temperature, that controls how the people are going into the workplace, to install the use of masks at the workplace, and to put up the social distancing. So that impacts costs, and that is a significant extra cost that the company has been able to manage. The advantage of that is that at the end, you have been able to continue doing business. So even though it's a temporary increment in cost, the most important is that the people has been able to continue going into the workplace. So that is very important. But also how Costa Rica has adapted in order to provide education by digital means is very important. We as a park started by changing the training programs that we have for manufacturing employees from present ones into digital ones, and everybody has been adapted. So Alvaro mentioned a point which is called resilience. So that is an example of resilience. Even though we have a COVID situation, we have been able to adapt to those new requirements from the very basic of the hiring to the operational level. So everybody now is adapted into that. The courses that we provide in the park for technical and for engineering levels and master levels has also become digital. So everybody has been able to adjust, and Costa Rica was prepared in that sense in terms of the platforms and digital platforms. Even though there might be some problems with the internet, we continue working around that and doing more and more intense digital kind of conditions, combine it with the presence that requires a manufacturing process.
Thank you. So very interesting point. So in general, we have been discussing, as with Alvaro, Carlos, and Margaret, the trends of what's going on in the industry, from the site selecting standpoint, different industries, an example, clinical trials and how companies look into opportunities, worldwide in places like Costa Rica, ideas of, short-term, long-term solutions that's to work out to maintain and keep consistency into the services and systems, the supply chain, trends for which very critical to the industry, and and how does everybody's working out throughout the COVID, and even though it's a global pandemic, at least Costa Rica, as pretty much many companies are working and coordinating their activities, around that and continue being supported by the different governments or locations. But at the same time, I'm going to start with Carlos on this other trend, which is what would you like to be developed different moving into the future? I mean, something that, because again, this is the pandemic and the critical disruption of 2020 on the real estate and the life sciences is something new, like everything else. It's kind of like that, major storm that governs every 100 years. So that said, what are the things that you think that we still have to, I won't say lack enough, but we can improve tremendously moving into the future, that we need to take care of so that the industry, the real estate within the life sciences continue to grow. Any thoughts on that?
Well, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. For the future, definitely, we all have to look into the real estate not only as a simple brick and mortar solution, but we have to think that the environment has changed, and there are certain elements that has to be at the same level of development. People, very important. All development that we do for the future has to take into account the people. Things have changed for the future with the COVID, like the entry ways, like how the people move. And so we have to create real estate solutions that put people as a central part of our developments. The other important elements that we have to take into account are going to be sustainability. Every part has to think on how can we adapt to the changes that are coming in the future in terms of sustainability. The use of the energy, the use of the natural elements, and the use of our relationship with the community becomes a very important point in terms of the sustainability of whatever development we do in terms of solutions for manufacturing or for services companies. So I would say that are two important elements. There are the people and are the sustainability parameters that are very important for our industry to take into account in terms of a combination between the real estate solutions, the people, and the sustainability objectives.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. And I have already a question from our spectators. One of the questions, probably, either Alvaro or Carlos can take it. It's like, what is our take on nearshoring to Costa Rica? Carlos or Alvaro, you want to take that?
Well, I will say that we are very well positioned, and I will allow Alvaro to expand on that, because definitely one of the elements that proved very well during this process is that the nearshoring of Costa Rica is very important. Every time that we had a problem with the logistics, our geographical location allow us to move and look for different suppliers. So if there was a problem on a supply coming from Asia, we can look for suppliers in Latin America or in the United States and resolve the position. We are also very close to the markets, so the solutions and the exchanges and the logistics are far more easier to resolve in case of problems. So the continuity of Costa Rica, combine it with the capacity to be very close to the main markets of the United States, allowed Costa Rica, a well-positioned country, in order to take advantage of the nearshoring relocation from faraway places that are located in the Asia region, or that might be in other places, Europe, but serves the US market.
Alvaro, anything else you would like to add?
Yes, sure, absolutely. And Carlos touched upon very good points. And I think the part of the geographical location, it's key. Those are one of the key things. If you think, when you've seen the process before, the supply chain, and when companies have actually looked abroad, focusing on maybe other areas or regions such as Asia and so forth, when they look into the markets, either the European or the Americas region, they would think, okay, maybe I'm going to put a plant in the US or closer. I think Costa Rica gives that flexibility, not only because of the time frame that which we are in, geographically speaking as well, because we have access to both of the coasts, and we'll be able to export to different levels. But as I mentioned as well, because of the openness of the economy through the free trade agreements, therefore that ease of business in terms of positioning, time zone, and as well availability to the different markets is important. But as well, one of the things that has been very important is that the companies which have been more successful in these times of COVID are the ones that have been able to quickly move their lines or quickly add additional areas of production to their companies. And Costa Rica has been that example and have actually provided that flexibility. So that nearshoring process in which you probably say, okay, this is kind of like the most the closest that you're going to get to the onshore position, but being able to take advantage of the geographical location, the talent availability, the track record that you have, and as well the cost savings that you find here is one of the key things. And that has been what we've seen with the companies trying to knock the doors with how is Costa Rica, what are we doing, and what can we offer. So again, I think we do get a privileged position in terms of being able to manage that nearshoring trend that is ongoing.
Thank you very much. And with the same lines, let me go back to Carlos on this. As an end user and professional, taking care of their sites and the 3 zones, when we look at, the supply chain, we look at the, partners in crime, like we tease about it, to the industry, those hubs that actually are there always for, the life science industry in Costa Rica. What 3 countries you will say are the most, reliable, or the partners that you have, throughout the years? What 3, when we talk about nearshoring and we talk about partners that you stated on the location, and to trades that we have with different, countries, which are kind of like 3 countries that you would say always rely on, XYZ countries because for specific needs, they're always there and they support us?
Well, it's a kind of a question that is related a lot to the supply chain structure of each one of the companies. Talking about our experience in terms as a real estate developer, definitely I would say first of all is Costa Rica. We cannot say anything else. We are the best country, but our country has a strong relationship with the United States. So that nurturing, that close location that we have between the 2 countries has allowed not only parts and components to come back and forth each one of our countries, but also products goes back and forth. So in terms of the logistics and in terms of the integration of a supply chain and value added, it is the most important relationship that we have today. There are other countries that provide components and parts that are also in the region, like for example, Mexico. Some of the component and elements in our case comes also from Mexico. We have been able also to bring components from other countries in the Latin America region, like for example, Brazil, even though in this process there are different types of logistics, we have imported also a structure from Brazil, from Mexico, from United States. There are certain areas where we switch our supply chain. We switch supply chain from China into Mexico or into United States as a better and closest location for our supply chain structure. For every industry that might change, but that is specifically in the case of the real estate industry where we are.
Thank you very much. And going back to the original question in regards to what we're looking into the future, from the select market, again, similar to the question that I was asking Carlos and Alvaro in regards to, what are we looking to the future that should be more competitive? What to do to bring more industries into, expand and keep growing throughout the industry from the marketing standpoint, from the magazine, what you would say those are the needs for the future? What you would like to see happen?
I mean, I think some of the trends that you're going to see are really the things that you're able to offer the life sciences companies looking to come back over, not just from China, but from India as well. You are really going to have to be innovative. What is considered a plus now in a site, like maybe they are able to accommodate with sanitization, with safety, security, and the connectivity. Moving forward, especially in 2021, I mean, that's going to be the expectation. And so the trend that I would like to see is more of the economic developers and the investment promotional agencies really be open-minded and ready to partner with these companies to become more innovative and supply those solutions that they're going to need in order to thrive in that area.
I think that's a good point, because that will go back to the daily operations of Alvaro at the local level, because now we're going to be talking about flexible contracts, working with documents and contractual agreements which are being more flexible. That will bring some, like you stated, more initiatives, from transportation standpoint, for the economic development standpoint, and how do we build a site, how do we maximize operations, the safety and security aspect of it. So Alvaro, let me ask you, as I bring those points, are those going to be really flexible? What's the trend that you see that will happen in the future?
Yeah, and that's actually a very good point. And it is a trend that we're going to see in the future, and it's something that we are focusing on. I think it's important for us as especially in the role of the advisory team here at CINDE, is to be able to find those needs of the companies and how we can relate them to the abilities and the dispositions that we already have in the country, and what things are needed to be able to be more flexible in that sense. So it's key for us to understand that and to be a role in playing in adjusting that. I think in terms of flexibility, you mentioned the word, and that gives us a point in which not only from a government standpoint, on a regulation standpoint, we need to quickly adapt, and that's kind of like the things that we've been able to see with the business continuity in Costa Rica. But how would that be maintained throughout the future? And that is one of the important points here. I do believe that we are working to make those changes on a permanent basis, and that those are the things that will give flexibility for the companies to be able to quickly ramp up, as I've mentioned several times, and take the advantage of the nearshoring, because people now are making decisions. Now's the time to understand this is the phase we've already passed through, the stability of the pandemic. We're adapting a little bit to the new normal, and thinking again how we're gonna reshuffle, how we're gonna continue growing. So that's important. And in terms of specific items that I think the industry is looking for, and as well through the part of the real estate, is I think there has to be a real good connection between the management of the companies and as well the management of the parks, so that they can work really close together and be able to provide that flexibility, either through the shorter lease lengths or some sort of flexibility. I think also on the part of, we mentioned the education several times, the talent, I think is as well is key for the parks to be able to find solutions together with the companies, and as well, of course, with the local players, academia and government institutions, to be able to, when companies will have to have their people on site, provide that closeness and that educational infrastructure to be able to deliver and provide that the services closer. Not I think it has to go hand in hand. That's what I'm trying to say. That solution has to be hand in hand with the parks. And one of the most important things as well that we haven't touched upon, of course, is going to be the environment and the SDGs for the companies. There has to be an alignment between the country, the parks, and the companies. There's no way in which you can find a long-term relationship in which those are not aligned. So I think having the focus on being able to provide efficient energy buildings, provide lower costs in terms of electricity, and understanding what are the goals in the long term for sustainability for the companies and the country, and aligning them is those are the key trends that I think in the future are going to be even more important after the pandemic.
Sure thing. That's a good point, and you summarized it very well. You know, it's a combination between the parks, and combination between the users, combination about the government. But I think that combinations happen far more than everybody change hands and be agree on what's to be done. Is throughout the real estate contractual flexible part of it, because that's what it comes kind of the bottleneck. So again, as you stated, it's a new game. It's a game changer in regards to how we are more flexible contractually. How in the industry we call it kind of like the just in time process that we do in the manufacturing. Now it's going to become also part of the how we document and contractually agree to be flexible in circumstances such as the COVID or circumstances which such as we have to be flexible to work together on this. And we have probably like 10 more minutes or so. I want to go back to a point that Margaret brought up in some respect, and I caught it a little, but I didn't want to be too much point out. But I would like as a closer statement in journey of you guys is we talk about the impact to COVID, we talk about the impact to the game changer, we talk about rumors and understanding how China is going to change the industry. I think it's overstated, but at the same time, for you, the experts, I'm going to start with Margaret. Because again, everything is not built or manufactured 100% in China. So there are flexibility, like you stated before, the clinical trials and some of the areas that still, been an opportunity to grow. And I just want to get your thoughts on that, on the corporate statement of, China is in jeopardy, and the industry and so on and so forth. What we stated, not to go political into it, but at least you get your senses as to what's your perception of it.
There's a lot of moving parts in that, not to be extremely basic, but the opportunity that is there for North America. Sometimes Americans tend to think that they're the only option, and they aren't. But when we look at the amount of US-based companies that are over in China, there's over, I think, right over 170 that could potentially be looking to come back. And the bottom line is that the US is not the only option. And in some cases, it's not the best option for certain categories underneath life sciences. I read an article the other day by McKinsey & Company about Quebec and Montreal being a huge artificial intelligence hub. And in many years past, companies that they've talked to out of California, New York, Massachusetts, the conversation has been the cost and how it's just not reasonable really to go to those 3 states that you can really, life sciences is a top industry for them, but they may not be the best option moving forward with the cost of living and with the cost of running a business there. But I think that there's a huge opportunity with these companies coming back, especially in Costa Rica, because of all of the programs that they have available workforce-wise. And so I think that answered the question. I'm not really sure. It's kind of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, we don't want to put you in the spot. We just want to get a feeling, because I very much agree with regards to that. I mean, when we look at North America, we look at, of course, primary industries are either in North America, some of them in Germany or the EMEA part. And at the end of the day, our industry in North America has focused more in the past into research, R&D, and those specific areas. And I think by bringing back the industry, those who will grow up in North America, or manufacturing advantages to other countries such as Costa Rica will definitely be a good hub for them to be considered as to how to work it out. And I think that's an opportunity there that everybody's looking at. Any thoughts on that, Alvaro?
Yes, I think here there was one key item, and that I would summarize it in a higher value add type of work, and this I would tie it to the research and development, to the R&D type of work that companies should focus on. I think we've seen through examples. Sometimes companies might think nearshoring should be only for the lower end type of work, but that's quite the opposite. Costa Rica has been an example, and when we have clients and we have companies come to Costa Rica, They get to understand what are the companies doing here, to what level of work can the companies and the talent here in Costa Rica do. They're really amazed on the level of who and the type of work that we can do. So therefore, the word R&D, research and development, is key. Is key right now to expand. I've mentioned before that the most successful companies are the ones that have been able to reshuffle their product lines. And that goes as well to the part of higher value added type of work. But that's where Costa Rica really stands out and really provides that cost efficiency because of the talent of the people, but as well on the different side, on the cost versus other locations like Ontario or other regions. And the benefits that we have from the free trade zone as well provide that additional bump in terms of the cost savings. Therefore, on the long term, you're going to have a really ability to be able to take advantage of the talent and the cost savings, and as well in the geographical standpoint. So I think all in all, it coincides really well.
Thank you very much. And I have another very interesting question from our folks watching our presentation. It's how does the cost of electricity affect our competitiveness for our nearshoring? You want to take that, Alvaro or Carlos?
Well, to make a couple comments, the cost of electricity definitely affects the companies, primarily for those companies where electricity is one of the main elements of auction costs. When you go higher and higher in terms of the technology, then at the same time, you're going to be requiring more and more electrical service at a competitive cost. So it's not only the quality elements, but also the cost elements that are coming into effect. Nevertheless, I think that there are changing elements in Costa Rica that are helping to improve that competitiveness that will put us on a competitive level. Those changes are related to the solar panels, solar energy possibilities. There is a new regulation that is coming in and will allow the companies to utilize far more extended the solar panel energies that is much more competitive than the regular electrical service of Costa Rica. Also, the changes in terms of the tariffs that are coming from the ICE, which is the main electrical company of Costa Rica, might be able to improve the conditions. We're still far away from where we want as a developer and as promoters of Costa Rica, of the investment into Costa Rica, but those elements mark a path towards a better future and more competitive position in the future for Costa Rica.
Thank you. And Margaret, do you think that, it's electricity, the cost of energy, it's a big factor when you talk about your, when you guys do the research and becomes kind of a bottleneck when they try to look into the best place to, relocate or, expand their operations? Would that be a factor within the first 3 factors that might be a showstopper?
I honestly don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question, but top 3 perhaps, but there are some companies out there that they might be willing to pay an increased cost for something that an increased cost of electricity if, say, the location was absolutely perfect or they were able to have access to the right talent or the right workforce. So it's really just a per basis type situation.
Sure thing, and thanks for the honesty again. I'm not to put you in the spot, but I think that's very important for everybody to understand, because one of the issues is, even though we look at energy for the existing industries, which are already in place, like Carlos mentioned, it could be or not an element of decision for a new expansion of a new opportunity for a new business to do, site selecting. Especially having, as we stated before in Costa Rica, the talent, the knowledge, the supply chain, and some other factors that might be in higher level when we do our, kind of 6 Sigma in some respect to what's the best, the best combination of factors. Alvaro, you say something, I believe.
Yes, and that is a very good point. But I think when we analyze, and Margaret mentioned it correctly, I think when a company analyzes if the cost of electricity is going to be a showstopper, I think the first thing to showcase is that if that would be the first or one of the most important things for a company to avoid investing in Costa Rica, we wouldn't have the cluster of medical devices that we have right now in the country. Having more than 70 companies in the life sciences sector, and as well having 14 of the top 30 as well globally, is a showcase that is not the underlying reason, or that is not the show-stopping aspect to it. So I think when you see it, it's very important. More and more companies have been focusing on trying to reduce their footprint. Carbon footprint either be carbon neutral or carbon negative. That's a trend that is ongoing, and Costa Rica provides that flexibility to be able to have clean, efficient energy. There's an additional cost to it, but with the changes of the regulation that Carlos was mentioning, Costa Rica should be able to position themselves already with the practically 100% of clean energy, and as well with cost effectiveness of the electricity. And when you combine that with the other decisions, such as the talent, such as the nearshoring abilities, with the geographical, with the access to the markets, and as well to the track record, that's when you put it on balance, and when you decide that Costa Rica is a good location. So I think, all in all, we don't try to hide anything that could be a little bit more negative for the company, but we tend to make sure that they understand the bigger picture and the stability on the long term.
Thank you. So in summarizing our discussion and trends regards to the site selecting and the new opportunities with the what we call nowadays the new normal, I think that, I will summarize, but it is still opportunities in the market, still very much opportunities. One disruptive situation might bring, an initiative and an opportunity as well. So everybody should stay tuned. There are many moving pieces, as we mentioned before, in regards to how the industry is behaving. But at the end of the day, what is most important is the real estate, the life sciences, and the environment for which they continue operating, supporting their activities, the part supporting, their tenants. I mean, the industry supporting the people, the government providing the support they need. So I guess we are in good hands. Of course, difficult hands, because it's globally the situation, but I think we'll come out of it, and we might do well in the near future. I really appreciate your feedback. Any closing statements that any of you wants to give? Margaret, any other thoughts as we close?
I want to add a little bit of what Alvaro was talking about. Just props to Costa Rica. I think once more, I know especially states start getting on that train of thought that reducing carbon footprint is not a trend, but it's a responsibility. And just the right thing to do, that will help them attract more companies that have those same values aligned. But I've always have admired Costa Rica's continued dedication to that initiative.
Thank you very much. Carlos, any other final thoughts you want to bring to our forum?
No, thank you for the opportunity again. And also just one long-term comments. We all have to think on sustainability. We all have to think on how to improve talent. And the main challenges that comes up for Costa Rica are precisely those: how to maintain the talent pool, how to keep improving our talent pool. And that's where we all are working in order to provide the sustainability conditions, to provide the talent pool of people that this industry needs, and to adapt to the changes that the industry are facing and going for our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks again. Alvaro, any thoughts as a last closing statement you would like to add?
Sure, perfect. And I think, all in all, this pandemic has been an eye-opener for everyone, and especially in the life sciences sector. I think as a country, we try to position ourselves focusing on what I mentioned before, on planet, people, and prosperity. And those are the key things that summarize everything that Costa Rica is trying to achieve. through the real estate as well, but as well through the companies and the work with academia. I think that opens everyone's eyes to different possibilities, different subsectors like pharma, diagnostics as well. Those are the key items or the key subsectors in which life sciences can expand and reshuffle with the nearshore. So again, I think it's been quite important, this conversation, and really enhanced our view.
Thank you very much, everyone. And again, I invite everyone to continue with the life sciences forums that we have today. Really appreciate Mario, Carlos, and Alvaro to join us today, and those who pretty much got to see our presentation. Look forward to continue expanding operations in Costa Rica and also bring the talent as well as to work different hubs throughout the industry. Thank you very much, everyone.
Interesante, Luis. Un placer contar con tu moderación para este panel.
Gracias, encantado, un placer.
Álvaro Cochea, Carlos Wong, Margaret Rose, Luis Torres Acosta, un panel muy enriquecedor. Antes de presentar a nuestro próximo speaker, le agradecemos su participación en la organización de este evento a la revista Inversión Inmobiliaria.
Bienvenidos a este siguiente panel de Ciencias de la Vida, una perspectiva de competitividad global. Básicamente vamos a estar cubriendo una serie de temas porque la industria de ciencias de la vida se ha convertido, como saben, en una prioridad para muchas comunidades, siendo un motor de desarrollo en todo el mundo. El sector tiene un alto impacto a nivel de grandes inversiones en investigación, de trabajos bien remunerados, y también va creciendo en términos de innovación a una manera y un ritmo muy veloz. Con más de 30 años de experiencia a nivel mundial, tenemos hoy con nosotros a Bob Hess de Newmark Knight Frank, y quien explorará el panorama dentro de la industria, las oportunidades potenciales y los factores que impulsan la selección de sitios competitivos para esta industria. Voy a cambiarme a inglés para recibir a nuestros invitados globales. Bob, Alan, nice to see you. Welcome to our panel today. We are going to be handing over the conversation and the microphone to Alan Reeves, who is the Global Strategy Managing Director at Newmark, and then he will introduce Robert. We will have some questions at the end. Over to you, Alan.
Great, thank you, Renee. Well, I am very pleased to introduce you to my boss and our group's vice chairman, Robert, or Bob Hess. Bob heads up our global strategy group based out of Chicago. We have offices throughout the U.S., but Bob really leads that practice for us. Bob is very much a preeminent leader within the site selection community with over 30 years of experience. He's completed more than 250 actual projects and assignments across the globe, including in Latin America. Works across all industries, across all geographies, but really has a special focus within the life sciences. And Bob and I have been very active within this sector recently, both from a U.S. perspective and from a global perspective, and are really looking forward to bringing that perspective to you in the audience today. I could go on, but I really want to give more of the time to Bob to cover that. I will jump back in later and we can go through some other specifics, but Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. And I'd like to say buenos dias and hello. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you all today from my home office in Chicago. I've been in my home office since March 12th. I've been in a plane a few times. I typically fly about 200,000 miles in the air every year, working with my clients across the globe on projects certainly related to many industries, but certainly life science. And I hope to bring all that experience from my past to the table today. We have quite a bit of information. There'll be a presentation coming up here in a second. I'm looking forward to sharing that. The title is called Life Sciences, a Global Competitiveness Perspective. And if you could bring up the slides, that would be great. I was actually scheduled to be in Amsterdam the next few days at the World Bio Conference, and certainly that's been canceled. So I'm glad I can actually be here speaking with you all about the life science industry. So if we could bring up the presentation, that would be great. Thank you very much. Hopefully the blue comes through. So if you go on to the next slide, and we'll be sending this presentation out to everybody after the meeting if we can't see some of the fonts and things of that sort. We prepared a lot of material for you, and I hope it'll help the audience. The perspective of obviously Costa Rica, but Latin America, but also across the globe I'd like to start out with my presentation that you all remember that the human genome was mapped back in 2003. And after 2003, there were many global projects in biotechnology that came from that. My story is this was one of my first global biotechnology projects. It was called Project Magellan. It was a $500 million biologics and monoclonal antibodies production facility. I spent a lot of time in Basel, Switzerland. Of course, that's where Roche and Novartis are headquartered. They actually are headquartered across the river from each other, and they actually spy on each other with telescopes. Pretty amazing, the cluster over there. But this was a very large project, and I think it's really important if you can see it, some of the criteria, which was important for this project. Obviously, talent and being in an industry cluster and accessibility globally. The client asked us to look at 20 countries in 20 weeks. That included Latin America. We did look at Brazil. Brazil did not make the short list, but this project ended up in Singapore. And this was just an amazing project. And I remember the earlier speakers from the conference talking about total cost of ownership. This is an example of a project that looked at cost and non-cost factors. And it's an example of the projects that will continue to look globally. And again, biotechnology is a very global industry. This went on to look at fine chemicals in Wuhan, sterile fill finish and vaccines in Italy. So again, a very globalized industry, and competing in the industry involves many of these variables you see in the table on the right. Next slide. I also wanted to share with you that this is a personal issue. Life science is about saving lives, and this has been my secret weapon. I have 2 daughters that were born with a fatal genetic disease. I don't mind sharing that with you. But we've done many things to save their lives, and it's allowed me to travel across the globe and meet many scientists and go to many conferences and learn a lot about cell and gene therapy and look at cures. So again, this is the personal side. This is about saving lives, and so that's another part of my background. And then, of course, in Latin America, I'm sure there are certain rare diseases and components of that. I encourage everybody to work with those organizations and learn from them. So I certainly have, and I feel like I have a passion for life science like nobody in the world, because it involves family, saving lives, and it's personal. Next slide. And so this is the practice that I'm working in. We do a lot of corporate site selection. You can go on to the next slide. It's one of our best practices. I work for a large global commercial real estate firm that has, we have resources all over the globe, and we leverage this platform. I've been to Costa Rica at least 5 times, personal and business, and I'm looking forward to talking more about how we perceive Costa Rica, this team here that you see, and how they understand Latin America and how they understand competitiveness and some of the factors that I think we can really focus on to make Costa Rica and Latin America more in the forefront of life science. Next slide. And these are some of our clients. I'd like to highlight a couple. When you talk about life science, I think people think about biotech and biosciences and pharmaceuticals, but they're also talking about companies like Indigo. You've probably heard of that company. That's in the agritech, agribio area. So life science transcends many different sectors, and we'll talk about that in a second. So excellent client base, from red blood cells to early cancer detection. So we've been very involved with many, many different industries that are very localized within states, within countries, or industries that are looking at multiple countries and multiple ecosystems across the globe. Next slide. And these are our Latin America life science clients. We're pretty proud of this. It's developing. It's amazing what type of capability you already have in Latin America. And of course, where you're going to take that more so from an innovation side, R&D side, and I'll call the whole issue around big data. Big data is making all of these companies rethink their entire life science platform. And that is a wonderful opportunity for Costa Rica, Mexico, Brazil, and other Latin American countries. We'll talk more about that. Next slide. And you can go on to the next slide. So the first thing that I want to talk about, what is the life science industry? It's probably really hard to see that. Maybe it's a little fuzzy, but basically this is like a value print of the entire industry. And And this goes from biosimilars on the top and therapeutics to agribio to respiratory devices. This is a complete map of all the segments that you should consider in Costa Rica and Latin America about where you could compete. So the question is, do you want to compete in all of these segments, from telehealth to delivery devices to proteomics to peptides to food sciences, nutraceuticals, even cosmetics are considered life science? So what is life science industry? Where are the jobs? You can see figures here for the US, 100,000 companies. In Latin America, you know, it's roughly about $76 billion as an industry and growing at 8 to 11%. So there is a lot going on to understand, but the key message from this slide is, where do you want to compete? What are the segments? What's growing? And how do your assets map up against this entire value print for the life science industry? Next slide. And here's some of the questions that our clients are asking. They do ask about clusters and ecosystems all the time. By the way, when you look at the life science industry, there's like 4 components. One is grow your own. And we heard some earlier speakers today that were fantastic. Those are the best stories in the world to talk about what you've grown locally, and where you've seen tech transfer, universities and incubators come into play. And then, of course, that evolves next to more ecosystem development and pipeline and talent development and universities and new skills coming out of community colleges. Then, of course, that's going to move into attraction. So you've got this retention, entrepreneurship, attraction, and then all these questions evolve in site selection processes along from that. So mature clusters, emerging clusters. Where are the regions? These are questions are focused on US areas, but you can put any Latin America in there also. They're going to ask where can they scale? Where can they have sustainable locations? Sustainability is a very important component of the life science industry. Obviously, they're always going to look at cost and labor and competition. One thing that a lot of life science companies look for is, what is their alternative career opportunities? So there is medical devices in Costa Rica, and I know that's phenomenal what you have there. If you want to evolve from medical devices, what's the next industry that you develop or be employed in? So you got to think about that ecosystem, and I'll call it alternative career opportunities for the scientists, for the people, for the medical technology. Where can they evolve? Where can they grow? Has to be part of the strategic development of the ecosystem. Next slide. And so where are the opportunities? Certainly, if you look at Latin America, Brazil and Mexico are the largest clusters. You've got Roche and Bayer and AstraZeneca, J&J, Novartis, Merck, the big companies in Brazil. I'm less aware of the small companies. There's a story to be told there. Who are the legacy players? Who are the unicorns? Who's emerging? Homegrown innovators. It's about telling your story, right? Is there venture capital across Latin America that can grow, be tapped into? Is that a region-wide collaborative effort on venture capital firms, developers, or is that more localized? So again, looking at this whole region, obviously Mexico and again, Brazil have the largest leaders, but again, Costa Rica is a powerhouse. So we'll talk about that later on in the whole medical device area and medical technologies. Next slide. So where is your opportunity? In these sectors that we talked about, even COVID related. One of the things that we want to make, if you see that graph on the right, we're seeing most of the activity right now in terms of people with cash being invested in, people like from Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon. He's investing in this sector. They're investing in these small startups and innovative companies that are putting new therapeutics and biologics and diagnostics and new technology in place. And they're growing through startup to growth to maturity. So that's a very important chart on the right, is to look at your Latin America profile and where does each country or does the region fall in its maturity curve, which I think if you've all been to business school or some people, you recognize that maturity curve. But it's a very important concept in terms of where you invest, early stage, late stage, developing ecosystem, infrastructure, all those types of things that we look at in terms of where is the opportunity. And when we do those global searches, if you remember the previous case study in Novartis, they wanted to look at 20 countries in 20 weeks. 20 countries in 20 weeks. That was almost impossible when we did it. And so it's really important to be able to know thyself about where you and get that message out there, where you want to play in that maturity curve, and make sure you're in front of these global entities, which are buying some of the smaller companies. That's the other side of this M&A. We'll talk about that in a second. Next slide. So every client is unique. And here's some common themes, some more common themes. You can read these. I won't read them to you. But there's always questions and researchable problems. One thing going on right now, there's just so much growth in PPE, in certain types of diagnostics and therapeutics, of course, in response to COVID-19. The questions being asked, are we growing too quickly? Are we getting out in front of our skis? I guess that's a US terminology. Are we investing too much? Are we growing too fast? You know, how do we put measured growth in place? Everybody wants to move fast for cures, saving lives. I certainly did in my personal life. I've been to no less than 20 international conferences with leading scientists, talking about enzyme replacement therapy, gene therapy, you know, vector integration, and I'll talk about CRISPR later on, which is an amazing new technology, looking for ways to save lives, save my daughter's lives. That's what's great about life science companies. They're purpose-driven, but they also have to run businesses, okay? And they're asking about business continuity and redundancy and savings and their real estate. So these are some common things we think about in terms of how the public sector can play into that thinking and answer these questions. So what drives these decisions? You go on to the next slide. What are the top 10 critical location factors? Now, you're going to have some speakers later today from other real estate firms. I think they're going to deep dive into a lot of these site selection factors. But here's the 10 that we're seeing. And of course, talent is number one. Always will be. But it's just not about availability. It's about the sustainability of talent, the innovation. The earlier speakers today were talking about the robust, I'll call it type of talent, to be able to have an aptitude to learn and to grow and evolve within the operation itself. It's a learning organization when you're in the life science industry. So that's going to go back to your schools and your education and your infrastructure in the area to learn about this industry and to, you know, make sure that, you know, you're really challenging people on problem solving and thinking about how to be that talent, that sustainable, innovative talent. Ecosystem alignment is really important. I'd like to use a United States example, if you allow me. Raleigh, North Carolina, RTP, you've probably heard of that. It's one of the most successful ecosystems in North America, but it took 30 years to develop that ecosystem from a concept 30 years ago to the powerhouse that it is now. There's a long journey and lots of change going throughout it. Real estate availability and flexibility, one thing that's important for Costa Rica and any country in Latin America right now is your real estate portfolio. Various forms of labs, wet labs, BSL, ISO level, wet labs. Here in the United States, we cannot find any lab space that's available for plug and play. So there's the issue around developers and your real estate profile in a state in terms of where can you find that lab space? Where can you find validated facilities? And that's a really important thing, you know, to these companies in terms of CapEx, timing, speed. We'll talk about that. And last thing to reinforce on this page, the others are pretty obvious, is tax structure. It's a very complicated industry in terms of where things are produced, where they're shipped, how they're taxed. And that's an important component of understanding where Costa Rica and Latin America play in, you know, global tax strategy with these larger firms and the smaller firms as they evolve. Next slide. And then, of course, you'll have to look at these factors. This chart should have graphics with check marks and Harvey balls. For each of those industries on the left, there's going to be some that are mitigable and nice to have, neutrals and must-haves in terms of how you would rank and score each of these areas of segmentation. Diagnostics and analytical services, digital healthcare and bioinformatics. You don't need a lot of site and buildings for that. So this is something for Costa Rica to look at. Look at these segments on the left and where you want to go, and then look at your assets across the top, and then score and rank them, weight them. So, I mean, for diagnostics and analytical services, cost is very important. Quality of life is important to all of them, maybe less so on medical distribution, right? So you got to think about the segmentations, the drivers, and then, of course, your asset mapping on what's driving the success in these industries. Next slide. A quick transition to offshoring of U.S. jobs, Asian jobs, to Latin America. Latin America is in the bullseye right now for reshoring and nearshoring. I think you've always been in the bullseye in Costa Rica. And I think the Invest in Costa Rica and Pilar and team do a great job. I just want to give them a call out. They do an excellent job positioning the country and the platform. But it is very competitive right now. And so this is something that it's like a carpe diem. I'll use that word. Something to take advantage of right now. There's lots of activity here. I won't say as strong as maybe I'd like to see it, but there is opportunity in PPE migrating. Well, I'll give you one example. Over 85% of all APIs, that's advanced pharmaceutical ingredients, have migrated to China over the last 20 to 30 years. One project I mentioned earlier in Wuhan was for Novartis, a fine chemicals plant. Migrating those back into the Americas is on the docket, but it's going to be very unique and it's going to be very competitive. So again, be thinking about what could be reshored from Asia. Where does Costa Rica, Central America, certainly Mexico fit into this relative to all the issues you see here? Trade tensions, national security, logistics, ports, airports, all these things are going to be evaluated. Next slide. And this is what they evaluate on the next page. We're doing feasibility studies for those firms right now. We are active in the sector and they're going like, hey, I'm not sure. It's called China Plus One. They're not necessarily going to relocate all these industries from Asia to the US or Canada or Latin America, but they have to investigate this. They have to investigate China Plus One strategies, okay? And all the boardrooms are asking, just take a look at the feasibility of this. And these are the factors that they look at. They look at labor availability, quality. So where are you in your training programs, in your workforce development in Costa Rica in terms of certain skill sets for certain segments that could reshore? Supply chain, a huge factor. Lead time. What about the cold chain? Cold chain is a very important component right now in terms of having vendors, things near the airport, facilities, understanding that component, and then of course infrastructure quality. So these are all the factors that are evaluated and quantified. If you go on to the next slide, you know, and so you have to do a rapid location assessment. That's what we're doing right now. And we'll move on from this slide to the next slide, but keep in mind, this is a good time for Costa Rica or any country, Mexico, Brazil, to be looking at these industrial companies, looking at your industrial parks, talking with your economic development agencies, and making sure that you can evaluate these opportunities and stack them up, you know, apples to apples in terms of comparisons. So back to the region, and I hope this is resonating with you. Next slide. Competing regionally or globally? This is a very important question. So are you competing Costa Rica with Mexico, with Brazil, with Argentina? We looked at Uruguay recently for, that was a BPO operation, but we saw some seeds of life science developing, and Chile has had some areas of technology related to this. So are you competing regionally or globally? Two different contexts, two different decision-making criterias, and also different approaches in terms of resources and the business case that you have to make. You know, Latin biotech firms, you know, I see them primarily competing regionally. Do you have Roche and Novartis? By the way, they are in Central America, but are they looking at advancing their global operations in the area beyond shared services, back office, call centers, maybe certain types of medical device? Are they going to, R&D is a very globalized industry, sterile fill finish, certain types of biochemicals, and all the segments. The most important slide in this presentation was the one up front when I showed you all the segments of life science. So where do you compete regionally and globally, okay? I mean, there's lots of competition even within your own region. So how do you evolve? Are you going to evolve upstream, downstream? And by the way, I think one of the biggest exciting parts of this industry is entrepreneurship in industry, growing your own. And I saw some examples earlier in the conference. We love those stories. If you can grow your own, that means you can compete regionally. And after that, you can compete globally. So it's an evolution in terms of how Costa Rica will fit into this competitive industry. I mean, pharmaceuticals are difficult. The cost is a big driver there. And of course, you know, China and India and other countries have been very competitive at that. So is that next for Costa Rica? Again, it's back to what's the best fit moving forward. If you go on to the next slide, and these are some of your next competitors. And all of these areas have to look at research, universities, and institutions. Obviously, the talent access, free trade zones, large markets versus small markets, proximity to the US, very important. And then of course, resources for different segments of that life science MAC that I talked about. So maybe you would disagree with the legacy leaders here and emerging contenders and the top tier and the on deck. But we were very surprised to see the amount of activity in all of these areas right now. And we're learning a lot about the life science market in Latin America. And I think this conference is spot on about creating that awareness and capability in all of these markets that are competing with each other also. Next slide. So the message here is, what's your badge? I guess the Spanish word for that is la insignia. What's your badge, Costa Rica? You can't have a badge in all of those segments, but where can you evolve upstream from R&D to manufacturing and development, obviously to sterile fill finish, distribution, different segments. There's a lot to be thinking about in terms of la insignia and where you focus your energy. And of course, one of your energy areas, next slide, is going to be in medical device. What a powerhouse. I mean, you all know this, but I don't think the world really realizes what a powerhouse Costa Rica is, in the medical devices. It's pretty amazing. And there's a lot to build on here because there's innovations going on in the supply chain for this industry. There's research and development on the effectiveness of titanium versus other rare metals used in, hip replacements and certain medical devices. So is that a connection to the rare minerals industry in Central America or Latin America? Rare minerals are a part of this. So that's about understanding the industries and the connection and the global supply chain and the gaps in the supply chain. So this is an exciting area, and I think there's much more to be done here in terms of looking at that upstream and downstream supply chain integration. Next slide. But there's some people out there that are making noise, and maybe you'll go scratch your head in this, like Puerto Rico. That's part of the United States, not Latin America. That's not how the Puerto Rico people are selling it. And that's not even how the leadership in the United States is going like, oh, let's look at Puerto Rico before we look at Central America. I called it noise. They're a bioscience powerhouse. But really? Peter Navarro says so. He tweeted, China fired, Puerto Rico hired recently in a tweet. And I'm not going to talk about tweets from our president, okay? I'll just leave it at that. But he's the director of trade and manufacturing policy. And so there's an ecosystem in place there that can evolve. So again, they're pushing cold chain, airports, free trade zone, their supply chain. Obviously, they have limited amount of talent and people. Automation, by the way, is going to impact things. So think about automation in the industries where maybe you need less people, or you're going to need higher skilled people. Can Puerto Rico evolve to that faster than Costa Rica? So I want to introduce automation into this also. So I'm calling it noise, but sometimes I think you got to get through Puerto Rico before you get to some of the Latin America countries or some US companies, which I call very short-sighted thinking. I don't know how you say that in Spanish, short-sighted thinking. But again, that's something I wanted to make you aware of. And I think I brought up some of the challenges. Next slide. These are some of the challenges in Latin America, and I think globally for most countries. Obviously, government spending, regulatory bodies, and approvals of products and commercialization, and the speed of that. Certainly, mergers and acquisitions. By the way, that is a good thing. If you look at most foreign direct investment data around the globe, everybody's thinking fragmentation here in the US there is, I know in Latin America. And one thing that I do want to mention, and I think the Spanish word is bienes races, that's real estate, right? CGMP facilities, validation, again, I mentioned labs, having that real estate portfolio. If you have available real estate, or you have developers in the area that understand that, that is a big competitive advantage in terms of if you have to look at 20 countries in 20 weeks, will you have facilities? Do you have vendors? Do you have developers that can really understand the specialized real estate has to be developed? And it's very, very capital intensive, this industry. So these are some of the challenges to think about as you develop your next level strategy for Costa Rica, for all of Latin America in terms of being competitive in this value chain. A few more slides and then we're going to get into questions. Next slide. There, you know, some things about Latin America that we've noticed. You have some of the most complete vaccination schemes in the world that are present in Latin America. I didn't know that. We were researching that. Costa Rica spends around 9% of its GDP in healthcare. It's about 17.7% in the United States. Mexico, maybe 6.5%. There are some new taxes in the region that are earmarked for healthcare, such as like sugary drinks tax in Mexico. I think there's some casino taxes in Mendoza, Argentina, and other things. You know what? You do need revenue sources for some of these challenges that I mentioned. I'm not sure if those are looked at positively or negatively, you know, by investors, but that's really something we've noticed also. And then, of course, the clinical studies in the region are thriving, you know, especially in large healthcare systems that can provide great numbers of rare diseases. I will give you an example. I think that's very interesting. You have a certain genotype, you have demographics in Latin America that can serve for laboratories for certain diagnostics and therapeutics and things of that sort. I think most of the large companies that are in Latin America have discovered that, but it even could be a bigger part of your, I'll call it your development strategy for maybe more of the smaller emerging companies that look at therapeutics and biologics and all of these new efficacy systems differently that involve big data. And I do want to mention that, if you go on to the next slide, the project activity in this sector is really amazing. And what's common to 67% of all the site selectors, the global leading site selectors, mentioned biotech and life sciences as the industry of the future for the entire globe. This is not just the US, this is the entire area. What I wanted to look at is your connection between food and beverage processing, advanced manufacturing, and biotech and life sciences, and transportation and logistics. This is setting the stage very well for assets that get into this, all five of these industries, from big data, software and IT, IoT, to the logistics and supply chain side, to the food side, feeding the world's population. Better food, healthier food is part of biotech and life science, advanced manufacturing like nutraceuticals. There's a lot of opportunity there to be thinking of. And some of the questions on the left, what we're hearing, they're asking questions about these industries and looking for connections. So I wanted to reinforce that relative to the previous slides about looking at these connections up and down the value chain. Next slide. And one of the last things I want to bring up is big data and digital. Now they're not talking about, you know, terabytes. They're talking about petabytes. I mean, the amount of information we could generate since we've mapped the human genome, this is a big part of the industry. So bioinformatics, big data, technology, digital, is that being developed alongside your programs in Latin America, in the countries, in Costa Rica, in the universities, in the schools, in Sao Paulo, in Mexico City, in Guadalajara, all of these cities that have major universities? It's a big part of life science. We just finished a project for a company that was a combination of healthcare, biotechnology, and big data. They did a lot of sequencing of all this information. They would get, you know, blood samples for cancer detection from various groups all over the United States and soon the globe. And they would use these Illumina machines that could sequence and centrifuge all of this, and then we'd capture this data. And the output was not a drug, okay? It was a script. It was a piece of paper that actually did diagnostics on cancer detection, certain types of diseases. So everything's evolving relative to big data, digital, and how all these industries emerge and develop together. Next slide. So big question is, what do we do? There's so much there. Bob, you're just exposing so much to us. It's like Where do we focus? Where do we spend our time and resources? And I think that's what you're doing in this conference. If you go on to the next slide, where do you fit in? You have to think, next slide. Attraction, retention, innovation, tech transfer, entrepreneurship, the cloud, virtual IoT, programmatic topical issues that come up like COVID-19. I've seen that you have several companies in Latin America that are involved in the research for COVID-19 and contributing because it is a global supply chain. There are certain components that are rolling into R&D in San Francisco, working with a firm in Latin America that's going to be, working on Operation Warp Speed here in the United States. Those are great stories to get out there. I haven't seen those stories. I would push those stories out and your message about where Latin America is going in some of those very nuanced areas. So, and looking at manufacturing, customer patient, R&D and engineering, suppliers, where do you fit in that circle? And where do you fit in on attraction, retention, and that kind of like that balanced scorecard? I'm going to leave it at that. If you bring up the next slide, I'm not going to go over all our case studies, but we just finished one for a company called Rubius Therapeutics out of Boston. It was so wonderful to work for this company, some of the smartest scientists in the world. And what drove this, Boston in the United States, a big generator of new therapies and new approaches. And of course, but when they have to manufacture at that, they typically don't do it, right there in Boston and Massachusetts. They'll either look next door, they'll look at ecosystems, or they'll look globally. So I'm assuming that the Latin America people in Costa Rica and other countries are spending time in Boston and in San Francisco and Zurich, Switzerland, looking at these companies and where they want to scale and stage next, because they come to us and say, hey, should we be local for lots of regions, or can we look at global operations now, or different types of configurations? This is what was important to them: R&D adjacency, certainly the talent and the workforce, operating costs all the time, and actually they needed an existing building. So I want to reinforce that real estate strategy for your region. What's your portfolio? What's your real estate? Are there developers in Latin America, like Alexander in the United States, who is the top developer of life science space? And they're building spec lab space all across the United States. Who are those developers across Latin America that could become more part of your collaborative team in positioning the region's strengths and capabilities? So this is a great case study. And I guess I want to end on the last case study, the next one. We were so proud for Alan and Alan was asking me some questions. Next slide. To work for a company called Grail. Grail is out of San Francisco. We just helped them put a manufacturing facility in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was so, they have taken cancer detection to the next level. At a 98% confidence level, they can detect anywhere from, I think Alan, 9 to 14 different cancer types early on, even before you would get the cancer, 10 or 20 years later. They're revolutionizing healthcare, cancer detection, diagnostics, and it was just a pleasure to work for these amazing people with their amazing purpose-driven organization. And guess who the investors are? Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, two of the largest, and I think those folks too down there in Latin America. Are they? And getting those investors involved and seeing different options. I think Grail at some point will be looking at Latin America. They're going to be looking at Asia when this capability continues to take off and actually becomes almost like a daily test we can do in our human resource benefits programs for companies, which they're looking at right now. So read up on Grail. And I think they even went IPO, and they might even be involved in an acquisition, M&A, right? So with that, I'm gonna leave it. If you just advance 2 slides, and then I'll be complete. I really appreciate you listening to us today. It was the next slide. It was my pleasure to share all this information. As you can see, I'm personally purposely driven about this industry. It has so much potential for Costa Rica and all of the Latin American countries. It's the storytelling, it's the segmentation. Where do you spend your time and resources? And how do you look at those challenges that we identified earlier and bring new players into the region to position yourself for success? So thank you for listening today. I think I'm almost like just 2 minutes over, and I appreciate your time and look forward to some questions.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. That was great. Obviously, a lot of information and data to cover. You can't quite do it justice in just 30 minutes, so we appreciate you condensing it down to that session. I want to go back to a couple of comments you made, maybe just dig into some of those in a little bit more detail. You talked about technology and new technologies in the life science industry and how it's really advancing biotech in so many different ways. You mentioned CRISPR and the initial mapping of the human genome. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? What you've seen as a result of that, how it's really affected things, and maybe some things that companies are doing to really take advantage of that.
Well, I would encourage everybody to hop on the internet, look up Dr. Jennifer Doudna. She just won the Nobel Peace Prize in chemistry regarding CRISPR. She's from the University of California, Berkeley. And what CRISPR is, it's got limited potential. It's about scientists have been kind of like deleting or inserting genes into bacteria, since the late 90s and early 2000s. This is a new process. It essentially, that was kind of dirty in terms of like inserting genetic material into certain types of, genes. And now they can actually, it was like throwing a dart. Now they can actually do it perfectly in terms of attaching a vector or certain therapies onto a specific component of the cell. And it's just incredible what's going to happen with CRISPR, just like, mapping the human genome. And there's going to be a lot of cures and a lot of precise science and therapies and new diagnostic and capabilities that have come out of CRISPR. So the relevance there is what universities, what collaborations are in place to make sure those new technologies that come out of, like CRISPR, are brought into the platform across Latin America in gene therapy, cell therapy, stem cells, all those types of things, which are really the future of life science in many perspectives.
Great, thanks. And we are obviously a global real estate firm, so I do want to touch a little bit more on the real estate aspect of life sciences. Very unique type of requirements, really wide scope in regards to what companies are looking for. You touched on that in your comments, but can you talk a little bit more about how that really drives a project, the different things that companies think about, depending on what level of lab space they need, whether it's BSL1 all the way up to BSL3 or more, and just how that affects the overall process for companies and how potentially Costa Rica can think about implementing some of those types of things to put themselves in a better position.
Yeah, great question, Alan. So at some point there has to be product. I mean, you have to land somewhere physically, and some elements to keep in mind. It might take up anywhere from 2 to 4 years to validate a CGMP manufacturing production operation. That's a long time, especially if you've come up with a new therapy or a cure or a program that you want to implement quickly. That's the big issue around COVID-19 right now, is we might be able to develop a vaccine, but where's it going to be produced and how's it going to be distributed to the population? So how do we get through that validation period? Well, that means you got to have facilities, almost spec buildings on the lab side, on the production side. And a good example, Alan, was our Grail project. What drove that project was existing facilities in North Carolina. That cut off years of the timeline in terms of creating the product. And now they're in the marketplace, putting their cancer detection out there. If they had to develop a build-to-suit facility, some of these companies aren't in the real estate business. So they're looking for existing labs, wet labs, CGMP facilities, other types of real estate. That's been one of the biggest constraints I've seen in my career since I started this kind of life science work back in 2003, is finding compatible real estate with the timelines on the project.
No, those are great comments, Bob, and maybe just to add to that a little bit too, from what we've seen from real estate search perspectives, that Bob mentioned it's really difficult to find existing lab space, not just in the US, but from a global perspective. And once you start getting beyond 50,000 square feet, it becomes even more difficult. There's only a handful of places in the really globe that can satisfy that type of need. So it really puts a community in a preeminent position if they have that type of existing asset in place.
Yeah, one comment on that. I think the universities can play a big role in that. So if you have I forget the gentleman's name earlier. I saw the conference where you have an idea. You have wonderful talent. They're in Costa Rica and other countries, but they need an incubator space. That is a great investment, whether it's on a university campus or in a separate facility, whether it's public, private sectorship funded. Those 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 person startup firms, they need that space. And that is a wonderful investment. I would encourage you to find the money, the sources, find a philanthropist and put that initial space in place. It will be filled. It will be filled.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question, Bob. I think it just comes back to maybe the competition aspect of it. And you talked about Brazil and Mexico really leading the way in Latin America for life science investment. Though Costa Rica has seen its share and significant portion of that as well. When you look across the competitive landscape, I mean, is Costa Rica in a position to compete with the likes of Mexico and Brazil and other larger players? You know, or do they need to really focus in on those specific, like you said, talked about those segments where they really have the biggest strengths?
Well, first of all, Costa Rica has been competing globally for a long time. So the aptitude and the attitude is there, right? That's an exciting thing. And this conference is a great example of that. So now the question is what's next? I said, what's the badge, the La Insignia? So obviously you leverage off medical device and medical, you know, the manufacturing side you have down there. But does that move into R&D, upstream and downstream? You've got to look at those segments. You've got to look at that one page in the report. I think, Alan, we had like 40 different segments there. Where an asset map against that and decide where do you start to catalyze some of those segments. By the way, there could be a gap in that whole supply chain in Latin America, and that's something that Costa Rica or other countries could take advantage of. So you really got to spend some time asset mapping, looking at that vertical and horizontal integration, picking your spots. And I don't know if there's anybody in here that has ever seen the game in the United States called Jeopardy, where you got to look at those segments and like, what are you going to bet on? Bioinformatics for $500, okay? You know, it's not a game, but it's about like, it's a strategic bet about where you're going to play in that landscape. And it sounds like Costa Rica is going to take advantage of that. And this conference is one step closer to that competitive business case. It is about a business case. So thank you for letting me speak about that. And Alan, thank you for the great questions.
Absolutely. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our time. So Arena, I'll throw it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Bob's presentation was certainly fascinating, giving us all this mapping of the opportunities we can as a country and as a region take advantage of. Muchísimas gracias a ambos, a Alan y a Robert, por sus brillantes intervenciones. Y antes de pasar a nuestro siguiente speaker, queremos agradecerle a los patrocinadores y dejarlos e invitarlos a ver el video de uno de ellos, de JLL. Los dejamos entonces con este video. Muchas gracias.
Recibimos ahora a nuestro próximo speaker. Posibilidades de hacer investigación biomédica, incluido un equipo médico en Costa Rica. Quien hablará será el doctor Fernando Llorca, embajador de Costa Rica ante los Estados Unidos de América, y quien lo presenta el señor Randall Fernández, especialista en real estate y colaborador de la revista Inversión Inmobiliaria. Randall ha cursado estudios en arquitectura y sociología en la Universidad de Costa Rica, tiene un posgrado en planificación y política económica del ILPES de CEPAL y una maestría en administración de empresas de la Universidad de San Diego, California. Randall, te agradecemos que estés aquí con nosotros para presentar al doctor Llorca.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Debbie. Me toca el honor de introducir al doctor Fernando Llorca Castro, excelentísimo embajador de la República de Costa Rica ante los Estados Unidos. Ese es un honor. Fernando es exministro de Salud de Costa Rica, expresidente ejecutivo de la Caja Costarricense del Seguro Social y actual embajador en Costa Rica en los Estados Unidos. El doctor Llorca ha trabajado como consultor en políticas de salud y como médico de atención primaria en Costa Rica y en España, y como analista de riesgos de salud y discapacidad en el Reino Unido. Como gerente médico ha trabajado para el sistema de salud pública de Costa Rica y para transnacionales de seguros de salud privadas en España como Cigna o Ageón. Posee un máster en políticas, planificación y financiamiento de la salud de la London School of Economics and Political Science en conjunto con el London School of Hygienic and Tropical Medicine, ambas de la Universidad de Londres. Además, 2 maestrías en Administración y Dirección de Servicios Sanitarios y en Economía de la Salud y del Medicamento de la Universidad Pompeu Fabra de Barcelona. Se formó como médico en Costa Rica y posee un diploma de estudios avanzados en política económica de la Universidad de Complutense de Madrid. Es un honor, don Fernando, recibirlo en este evento. Muchas gracias y adelante.
Encantado de estar con ustedes, Randall. Más bien, muchas gracias a vos por esa cálida presentación y bienvenida. Es un honor para mí y quiero agradecer especialmente a la revista Inversión Inmobiliaria por haberme invitado a participar en este evento de Ciencias de la Vida tan importante y compartir panel con a quienes saludo también a una gran cantidad de expositoras y de expositores de amplia experiencia en este campo y que pues ya hemos conocido sus puntos de vista sobre las oportunidades que ofrece Costa Rica en este campo y que viene ofreciendo desde hace muchos años, hay que decirlo, como una clara política de Estado apoyando la promoción de las ciencias de la vida y su desarrollo en nuestro país, para nuestro país y para el exterior. Lo cierto es que la producción científica en Costa Rica no es algo nuevo. Costa Rica a nivel regional siempre sobresalió como un país que producía ciencia y ciencia aplicada muchas veces. Quiero recordar aquí 2 grandes proyectos que se han desarrollado. Uno, el que lideró el propio doctor Clodomiro Picado Dwight, a finales del siglo antepasado en Europa y a principios del siglo pasado ya en nuestro país, en el Hospital San Juan de Dios, en los años 20 y 30, donde llegó a hacer estudios, aportes muy valiosos sobre el penicillium y sus aplicaciones antibacterianas ya en aquel momento, y que posteriormente el Instituto Clodomiro Picado continúa bajo el apoyo de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos en Costa Rica, la Universidad de Costa Rica y el Ministerio de Salud a partir de los años 50 y 60, muy especialmente en los trabajos de producción de suero antiofídico, un problema de salud conocido popularmente como las mordeduras de serpientes, y su tratamiento con sueros desarrollados en Costa Rica, producidos en Costa Rica, registrados a nivel internacional como propiedad intelectual y aplicados en todo el mundo, inclusive en los rincones de Asia y de África donde se necesitan. Lamentablemente, en el año 2010, a consecuencia de mantener una legislación débil, una regulación débil de la investigación biomédica en nuestro país, se detuvo dicha actividad gracias a una intervención judicial en aquel momento sumamente traumática para todo el proceso, el desarrollo científico de la investigación en salud y en biomedicina, y nos costó varios años en recuperarla, pero lo hemos hecho y estamos en esa ruta. Por favor, quisiera pedirle a Nico que empecemos con la presentación. Estamos a punto de cumplir el bicentenario, y Costa Rica pues tiene una población de 5 millones de habitantes con 3.5 millones de turistas que nos visitaban antes de que se diera la pandemia. Sin embargo, sabemos que algún día vamos a recuperar esas cifras. En los años, desde 1870, la educación básica fue declarada gratuita tanto para hombres y mujeres. Por lo tanto, Costa Rica es un país que mantiene una amplia igualdad en el campo de la educación, tanto para hombres como para mujeres, desde aquellas épocas. Un alto nivel de alfabetización de 97.6%. Acumulamos hoy en día más de 130 años de democracia, casi 80 años de seguridad social y garantías sociales, 80 años es la expectativa de vida que ya alcanzamos desde el año 2019 para ambos sexos en promedio, y tenemos la suerte de no contar con ejército desde hace ya casi 72 años. Hemos invertido también como una política clara de Estado desde hace muchísimos años en la conservación medioambiental y la sostenibilidad de los desarrollos que impulsamos en Costa Rica, y esto nos ha producido contar con una alta disponibilidad eléctrica producida por fuentes renovables en un 98%, 78% proveniente de hidroeléctricas, 10% de energía eólica, otro 10% de energía geotérmica y de biomasa y solar un 1% que esperamos que crezca con el tiempo. Otro aspecto importante en las políticas medioambientales es que hemos establecido al menos un 30% de protección de nuestro territorio nacional por parques nacionales o reservas, y hemos sido capaces de reforestar gran parte de nuestro territorio, y hoy en día contamos con una cobertura de bosques del 52.4%. Por favor, continuemos, Nico. El perfil poblacional de Costa Rica ha venido cambiando de uno piramidal a uno cilíndrico, y como causas más importantes, grandes grupos de causas de muerte, pues tenemos un 79% de causas por enfermedades no transmisibles, un 11% por causas externas y tan solo un 7% por enfermedades transmisibles. Sabemos que con la situación actual de la pandemia por COVID estos datos van a cambiar. Por favor, la siguiente, Nico. Sin embargo, hay que reconocer que el perfil epidemiológico de nuestro país es muy similar al de países más desarrollados con las causas cardiovasculares a la cabeza y otros cánceres y problemas respiratorios. La siguiente, por favor, Nico. Y esto es importante también mencionarlo, la inversión, la alta inversión, producto en gran medida de esa abolición del ejército en los años 40, que nos permitió invertir en salud y educación, un 7.36% para el 2018 en educación, y en salud un 7.8% del PIB, ambos. Recordando que somos, según un estudio muy interesante de la London School of Economics and Political Sciences, que somos uno de los 2 países de Latinoamérica que invierte más de un 6% del PIB en salud pública. Y esto nos permite realmente haber alcanzado la cobertura universal desde los años 80 hacia ya. Por favor, la siguiente. La distribución del gasto en salud es muy interesante porque, como he dicho, la mayoría es público, y un financiamiento público, un 70%, pero un 23% se mantiene en promedio en los últimos años, creciendo de inversión por parte del sector privado, especialmente de gasto directo o de bolsillo. Sin embargo, la actividad aseguradora privada de seguros de salud también ha crecido y se ha duplicado en algunos rubros en los últimos años. La siguiente, por favor. Esto nos sitúa, nos ubica en varios rankings sobre sistemas de salud internacionales en buenas posiciones. La número 33, de acuerdo con el índice de Bloomberg 2018. En la posición 25, la 25ª economía más eficiente en inversión de salud, también para el mismo índice. El tercer mejor sistema de salud del mundo, según el Annual Global Retirement Index del 2020. En la posición número 36 en desempeño del índice de prosperidad. Y hemos recibido un premio recientemente en el 2019 por parte de las Naciones Unidas reconociendo el esfuerzo del desarrollo del expediente digital único en salud, el EDUS, que nos permite amarrar todo el sistema desde el punto de vista informático. Por favor, la siguiente. El sistema público de salud es un sistema escalonado de zonas de atracción con un nivel un primer nivel de atención o nivel de atención primaria, de cobertura prácticamente completa, nacional, con segundos niveles de clínicas y hospitales pequeños, y un tercer nivel de hospitales generales nacionales, que son 3. La evolución del EDUS fue muy importante, ya que se empezó a desarrollar, a diferencia de otros países, desde el primer nivel hacia el último nivel. Y esto nos permitió construir la unidad del sistema desde lo más masivo y amplio en términos de cobertura nacional a lo más especializado, inclusive subespecializado, como por ejemplo el Hospital de Niños o el Hospital Psiquiátrico, que fueron de los últimos en incorporarse. Pero hoy en día tenemos todo el sistema conectado. El valor de contar datos estandarizados, transversales para la investigación masiva es determinante hoy en día, lo sabemos. La siguiente, por favor. Como dije, tenemos un sistema único de recolección de datos en el EDUS. Eso lo tenemos también por zonas en todo el país y vinculado a el número de identidad único, que es otra característica muy importante de nuestro sistema que nos permite y nos va a permitir impulsar aún más la investigación biomédica, ya que en muchos países existe todavía ese debate de si hay que tener un número único de identidad para todos los ciudadanos. En Costa Rica lo tenemos e inclusive para muchos de los habitantes, aunque no necesariamente sean ciudadanos en nuestro país. Continuemos. La siguiente, Nico. Gracias. Tenemos un sector privado también muy sólido que ha venido creciendo en los últimos años. Contamos con 10 hospitales. Es cierto que muchos están centralizados en el gran área metropolitana, pero ya van teniendo presencia en todo el país y esto es muy importante. También, por favor, continuemos con la siguiente. Para lo que Costa Rica también ha venido impulsando, que es el desarrollo del mal llamado turismo médico, pero es la exportación de servicios de salud, donde, por ejemplo, contamos con apoyo no solamente a la gran cantidad de turistas que nos visitan o nos visitaban antes de la pandemia, sino que también a la producción, por ejemplo, o exportación dirigida de servicios de implantes odontológicos de producción, manufactura, artesanal, artística, de prótesis dentales, etcétera. Continuemos, por favor. Todo esto se debe en gran medida a un talento humano muy importante y en el sector salud quiero recalcar que es de altísima calidad, como en otros. Contamos con 8 escuelas de medicina, 9 de enfermería, 7 de farmacia, 5 de odontología, 3 de microbiología, 4 de nutrición, muchas de ellas acreditadas por el Sistema Nacional de Acreditación en Educación Superior, un sistema que está vigente y actualmente en proceso de revisión y mejora. Quiero recalcar también aquí que hay una producción muy importante de ingenieros, por ejemplo, en biotecnología, de ingenieros en electromedicina y también en otras ingenierías que afines al sector salud y que complementan el desarrollo de software, de otro tipo de servicios hoy en día sumamente necesarios. Costa Rica exporta educación en salud de grado desde hace muchos años en todas estas profesiones y también hay muchas experiencias exitosas de estos profesionales fuera del país, documentada. La siguiente, por favor. En Costa Rica creemos fielmente que ni el sector público lo puede hacer todo, ni el sector privado lo puede hacer todo. Por eso creemos fielmente y recientemente se han renovado los marcos regulatorios de promoción de participaciones público-privadas. Y yo quiero recordar aquí 2 convenios que han sido firmados recientemente en el campo de la educación, donde la caja permite que universidades privadas vayan a formar especialistas en medicina, que es una de las áreas más competitivas, desde el 2017 y uno más reciente en el 2019. Continuemos, por favor. Gracias a ese capital humano nos situamos en algunos rankings especializados muy bien. Por ejemplo, en el ranking de competitividad global de 2018, Costa Rica es número 1 en capital humano en Latinoamérica. Y también mantenemos una capacidad de proveer capital humano en otros idiomas, muy especialmente en inglés. Sin embargo, hemos documentado al menos 13 idiomas en el que podemos proveer capital humano a las empresas que decidan invertir en nuestro país en este campo. Y hay que decir que gracias al apoyo del presidente don Carlos Alvarado Quesada se ha impulsado una transformación bilingüista en nuestro país a partir del 2018 y que esperamos que en los próximos años vaya teniendo un impacto de cobertura nacional en ese campo. Continuemos, por favor. En el campo de la investigación biomédica, antes de ese gran problema legal que tuvimos en el 2010, habíamos desarrollado o habíamos contribuido a desarrollar la vacuna del virus del papiloma humano en el 2004 con una investigación muy importante que se coordinó con el Instituto Nacional del Cáncer de los Estados Unidos, parte del NIH. Sin embargo, ya para el 2014, la Asamblea Legislativa aprueba una nueva ley de investigación biomédica, que por supuesto es una de estas leyes bioeticistas, que por cierto los usuarios y los científicos suelen señalarla como altamente promotora y defensora de los intereses bioéticos. Sin embargo, con las experiencias legales que hemos tenido y las que han vivido otros países desarrollados del mundo, sabemos que lo mejor es mantener una regulación y una legislación sólida, incuestionable en ese campo, para que la producción científica, producto de la aplicación de estas reglas y normas, también sea incuestionable y sea ampliamente apreciable, como lo suele ser en el resto del mundo. El CONIS, que es el Consejo Nacional de Investigación en Salud, liderado por el Ministerio de Salud, funciona desde el 2015. Tenemos reglamentación desde el 2015-2016 y hay que decir que ya están activos al menos 17 comités éticos científicos en el país, tanto públicos como privados. Hay que decirlo aquí se reconocen comités éticos científicos privados también, y estamos en un proceso de renovación en nuestro país que busca esencialmente desarrollar o consolidar el Comité Ético Científico Central del Ministerio de Salud, que nos permitirá hacer estudios de bioequivalencia o de fase 1 en nuestro país, autorizarlos. Segundo, queremos incluir, y esto va a ser una realidad pronto, la posibilidad de hacer investigación con dispositivos médicos, como se ha explicado muy bien a lo largo de este evento de LifeSciences. Muchos de los expositores han recalcado la importancia y cómo van a ganar protagonismo los dispositivos médicos en el futuro cercano. Y finalmente, estamos haciendo los cambios necesarios para que se puedan desarrollar investigaciones masivas con participaciones, por supuesto, público-privadas, con entes públicos, proveedores de servicio en nuestro país. Una revisión de simplificación de trámites se encuentra en este momento aplicándose y sabemos que eso va a ser una realidad pronto. Esperamos que a más tardar a inicios del año entrante. Continuemos, por favor. A pesar de y previo a esos cambios, ya hoy en día es una realidad que tenemos investigaciones articuladas con institutos del Instituto Nacional de Salud de los Estados Unidos, como la que se declaró en el 2016 de interés público y prioritario para nuestro país, el proyecto Escudo, donde se valora la aplicación y reacción inmunológica en anticuerpos de la vacuna del papiloma humano. Este es un esfuerzo desarrollado entre participación también público-privada entre la Caja Costarricense de Seguro Social, el Ministerio de Salud, la Fundación FUNIN, a la que reconocemos su esfuerzo, y el Instituto Nacional del Cáncer del NIH de los Estados Unidos. Sabemos también que el Instituto de Alergias e Infecciones de Enfermedades Infectocontagiosas, que por cierto es el instituto liderado por el doctor Fauci, Anthony Fauci, también está desarrollando proyectos de investigación en Costa Rica desde el 2016 y de fase 2 para desarrollar una vacuna contra el Zika, por ejemplo. Y en el 2018 hay que reconocer también que inversiones de centros, aprovechando la importancia de los call centers y su promoción en Costa Rica y la disponibilidad del talento humano para hacerlo, centros de recolección de datos para efectos de farmacovigilancia, que recordemos aquí, una vez que los productos ya se encuentran en el mercado, es importante y muchos países tienen regulaciones que exigen al productor y comercializador de estos productos el vigilar sus reacciones una vez que se encuentran en el mercado. Y en Costa Rica se ha demostrado que el talento humano bilingüe al alcance de estos inversores es una realidad, no solamente en momentos puntuales, sino que es una realidad garantizada, constante y permanente gracias a esta producción de talento humano tan importante que tenemos. Futuros campos que podemos explorar es el de la tecnovigilancia también y de la atención o el seguimiento de post-atención a pacientes o post-venta, en algunos casos, de productos que podemos impulsar en nuestro país, siempre con proyección y cobertura universal. Por favor, siguiente. Para el 2021 ya se proyectan investigaciones muy importantes, como dije, entre el Instituto de Alergias y de Enfermedades Infectocontagiosas y el Instituto contra el Cáncer de los Estados Unidos, conjuntamente con la Fundación Inciensa y la Agencia para la Investigación Biomédica de Costa Rica, muy relacionados, por cierto, con el COVID-19. Quiero recordar aquí el esfuerzo del Instituto Clodomiro Picado por desarrollar un suero anti el virus del SARS-CoV-2, productor de la enfermedad COVID-19. Y finalmente recordar aquí que en Costa Rica ya hemos sido capaces de mapear el gen del virus desde hace ya varios meses. Y gracias al Inciensa, que es el laboratorio de referencia por excelencia del Ministerio de Salud, y al el Consejo Técnico para la Bioinformática Clínica, también dependiente del Ministerio de Salud, que es el ente responsable del proyecto genómico de Costa Rica. Aquí quiero recalcar que Costa Rica también produce profesionales en bioinformática muy reconocidos a nivel internacional, en fisiología celular, en genética, etcétera. Continuemos, por favor. Y es importante siempre mencionar que Costa Rica es un país respetuoso de los derechos humanos, que tenemos políticas, por ejemplo, de anti-estigmatización de los pacientes con enfermedades mentales o demencia. Tenemos un programa de trasplantes histórico, lo que quiere decir que Costa Rica tiene el talento humano y la capacidad del sistema de salud de efectuar sistemáticamente procedimientos altamente complejos en nuestro país con éxito. Y ese programa de trasplantes fue recientemente modernizado entre el año 2014 y 2016 con nueva legislación y regulación que le proporcionan esa solidez legal suficiente para ser reconocido y respetado a nivel internacional. Tenemos también políticas de asilo para migrantes y una capacidad del sistema para abordar epidemias y pandemias demostrada, como lo ha sido con el caso de la malaria, el caso de la oportunidad que enfrentamos el Zika y bueno, ahora que estamos enfrentando la pandemia de COVID. Recordemos que una de esas primeras respuestas que debe dar un país, un sistema de salud, es la capacidad de registrar los casos. Si no somos capaces de registrar los casos como país, como nación, y de darle seguimiento y ojalá aislarlos para evitar su propagación, pues evidentemente el sistema de salud es un sistema de salud que no afronta apropiadamente las epidemias y las pandemias. Finalmente tenemos un programa de vacunación muy fuerte con amplias coberturas que superan desde hace muchos años el 90%, inclusive el 95% más recientemente. La siguiente, por favor. Y Costa Rica ofrece un ambiente de negocios brutal, como ya se ha explicado también en otra de las presentaciones, 15 tratados de libre comercio con 57 socios internacionales, nos permiten el acceso a 2.5 billones de personas. Son datos de posibilidades de vinculación internacional con cualquier cosa y producción que se haga en Costa Rica muy sólidas. Tenemos muy buena posición en Latinoamérica, la primera en el índice de innovación, el WIPO 2018, por ejemplo. Esta capacidad de desarrollar creatividad, de innovar es determinante en muchos de estos campos. Y desde el 2018 el equipo médico es uno de los principales productos industriales de exportación, sino el principal muchas veces en Costa Rica, y esto nos plantea el siguiente reto. No solo queremos que sean manufacturados en nuestro país estos productos, sino que ojalá sean diseñados y desarrollados también en conjunto con el personal técnico público privado de nuestro país, y ojalá no solamente podamos desarrollar productos innovadores en nuestro país, sino también desarrollar aplicaciones. Muchas veces, y siempre pongo el ejemplo del fax, el fax se desarrolló muchísimos años antes de que se le encontrara una aplicación, y con frecuencia la creatividad que nos hace falta es para buscarle aplicaciones a la tecnología que ya existe y nos acompaña desde hace muchos años. Les pongo el ejemplo de la realidad virtual, que está con nosotros desde hace bastantes años ya, y seguimos buscándole aplicaciones en el campo de manejo de pacientes previos a cirugía para ambientarlos y reducirles estrés, por ejemplo, oportunidades de ver cómo la realidad virtual nos ayuda a la educación, no solamente la educación tradicional de pilotaje y de otras aplicaciones, sino en el campo de la educación de profesionales de salud. Todo eso está pasando en Costa Rica ya y es una realidad, al igual que en otras latitudes del mundo, pero en Costa Rica con especial intensidad y apoyo de estas iniciativas de LifeSciences que el gobierno y el sector privado han impulsado en nuestro país. Y por favor, finalmente, Nico, para terminar, recordar que el país es un país que respeta las instituciones de legalidad vigentes, nacionales e internacionales. Estamos sujetos a los procesos de arbitraje internacional y de resolución de conflictos. Somos miembros activos de las organizaciones internacionales. Tenemos una estabilidad política y una democracia demostrada durante muchísimos años. Como lo mencioné, y recientemente hemos sido incorporados definitivamente o invitados a incorporarnos definitivamente a la OSD, y estamos finiquitando esos últimos detalles para hacerlo una realidad y, por supuesto, continuar implementando las buenas prácticas de gobierno en nuestro país. Muchas gracias.
Aló. Don Fernando, muchísimas gracias. Si tuviéramos que hacer una pequeñísima, digamos, resumen de lo que nos has expuesto aquí, es las capacidades que tiene Costa Rica naturalmente y por todo este desarrollo del sistema de educación, generando capacidad científica, y por otro lado, esta integración de la inversión extranjera directa, de los tratados de libre comercio. Estaba revisando en la mayor parte de los tratados de libre comercio, la parte de medical devices juegan un rol, pero nos has además ampliado todo el abanico de posibilidades hacia otras áreas en las que Costa Rica podría tener un enorme potencial. Como embajador de Costa Rica ante los Estados Unidos, conversábamos el otro día que quedaba todavía espacio como para terminar de posicionar. La tarea que hace CINDE es extraordinaria, pero que aún tendríamos un camino que recorrer para traer más empresas, más diversificación hacia la inversión extranjera directa de Costa Rica.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Randall. Efectivamente, el país ofrece como fortaleza principal el talento humano. Un talento humano que se renueva constantemente, hay que decirlo, y que en muchas áreas ha demostrado ser capaz de producir con creatividad nuevos desarrollos en el campo del software, por ejemplo, en el campo de en la aplicación de estas tecnologías, por ejemplo, para programas de televisión animados, etcétera, para la publicidad y la comunicación también. Y en el campo de la salud, lo mencionaba e insistía yo, estos call center de apoyo, que quiero decirlo aquí muy claramente, no en cualquier lugar del mundo las empresas son capaces de contratar médicos, farmacéuticos, que estén dispuestos a atender llamadas telefónicas y a hablar directamente con pacientes para registrar los eventos de reacciones adversas, de eventos secundarios o efectos secundarios que puedan producir determinado medicamento. Y esa recolección de la información por parte de estos profesionales altamente calificados, insisto, perfectamente accesibles a estos inversionistas, hacen que Costa Rica sea un escenario totalmente singular en ese campo. Y quiero decir que tenemos muchas oportunidades de ampliación. Hay la tecnovigilancia, que es la vigilancia no solamente de los medicamentos que uno se toma, me refiero, esa es la farmacovigilancia, pero en el caso de la tecnovigilancia, es la vigilancia de los dispositivos médicos o, por ejemplo, de los equipos de diagnóstico. Y esa tecnovigilancia es tan importante que nosotros con frecuencia a veces olvidamos aquel episodio, y se ha dado en otros países, aquel episodio de sobreirradiación de pacientes, ¿verdad? Por ejemplo. Gracias a la tecnovigilancia apropiada que hoy en día tenemos en Costa Rica y que hemos demostrado aplicarla, se podrían aplicar desde Costa Rica para el resto del mundo. Pero sí hay oportunidades. Si el NIH y sus institutos, insisto, uno liderado por el doctor Anthony Fauci, confían en la calidad de la investigación que se hace en Costa Rica, ¿por qué no el resto de investigadores privados o financiadores de la investigación privada que existen en el mundo lo van a hacer en nuestro país? Ese es el gran reto y la invitación que estamos haciendo.
Bueno, me parece muy clara, digamos, la posición. El otro día te preguntaba, ya fuera de cámara, si quisiera hacerlo ahorita acá, cuando te toca esa tarea, digamos, de promotor de Costa Rica, de mercadólogo en el mundo, digamos, de los Estados Unidos, donde tenés enfrente a la posibilidad de hablarle a mucha gente, ¿cuáles son, además de estos factores que has mencionado, digamos, las herramientas, los casos de éxito que más te llaman la atención como para inmediatamente hacer un enganche con posibles interesados?
Bueno, en este campo, insisto, el desarrollo de estas vacunas contra el virus del papiloma humano, ahora cuando salga, todavía no ha salido, pero va a salir, ya dejó de ser un problema, pero el Zika, Costa Rica contribuyó mucho para desarrollar la vacuna del Zika, que viene de camino, no está finalmente desarrollada, quiero recalcarlo acá. Y además, quiero decir que siempre que empiezo este tipo de presentaciones, la gente se sorprende cuando menciono que Costa Rica, que es un tradicional productor y exportador de piñas y de bananos o de café, hoy en día se ha metido en esta exportación masiva de dispositivos médicos de alta calidad, muy delicados. Recordemos que son muchos de estos dispositivos aplicados en países europeos, de los Estados Unidos, de Asia, los más desarrollados, y les aseguro que estos países son muy exigentes. Yo que he ejercido en Londres, en España, en Madrid, durante muchos años como médico, son muy exigentes de la calidad de los productos que va a utilizar su población o ellos mismos, en caso de los tomadores de decisión. Entonces, esas son las mejores garantías y los mejores ejemplos que tenemos, y en gran medida se debe al modelo de atracción de inversiones directas, a la promoción y la renovación, que tiene que ver con las zonas francas, que han sido ampliamente mencionadas durante el panel, una política de Estado de muchos años, a la política de Estado de mantener estas políticas de tratados de libre comercio ampliamente diseminados, manteniendo siempre a Costa Rica en el centro. Y hay que decir que a la par de políticas laborales muy sólidas, de respeto a los derechos humanos, de democracia, de institucionalidad, del respeto de los procesos legales, de las garantías que tienen los inversores, etcétera, que se han mantenido y se seguirán manteniendo sin duda alguna, del respeto al medio ambiente, y voy a decirlo así, gracias a unas políticas de sistema de salud sólido que nos ha permitido formar gente, demostrar que podemos desarrollar estos procesos, estos procedimientos, como lo mencionaba yo, el programa de trasplantes, exitoso, sólido, durante muchos años, etcétera. Randall, esos son los ejemplos de éxito que son la mejor carta de presentación para Costa Rica.
Bueno, no queremos pasar sin agradecerte el tiempo, la disponibilidad, el trabajo que estás haciendo representando a Costa Rica en los Estados Unidos, y con todo ese bagaje y conocimiento. Te deseamos muchos éxitos y muchísimas gracias, Fernando, por tu participación, por tu tiempo y por ser un talento más de Costa Rica de exportación.
Muchísimas gracias, Randall. De verdad que ha sido un gusto y bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a ambos, un placer escucharte, Fernando. Randall, excelente tu moderación, como siempre.
Gracias.
Link para facilitarles el acceso. Las actividades son Coyol Free Zone y La Lima Free Zone and Business Park. En el caso de La Lima, hablarán sobre Cartago, un nuevo polo de atracción de inversión extranjera al este de Costa Rica, que trabaja de la mano con aliados estratégicos. En el caso de Coyol, hablaremos sobre dispositivos médicos 4.0, la nueva generación de dispositivos disruptivos. Recuerden entonces, tienen ahí en nuestro chat el link para acceder a cada una de estas salas. Nos reencontramos aquí a las 13:45 para continuar con los paneles de la tarde. En este caso serán Historia de éxito en Life Science, Industrias de Ciencia de la Vida en Costa Rica, un ecosistema de historias de éxito. Luego, Ciencias de la Vida y Real Estate, cómo sacar ventaja de la estrategia de Real Estate para optimizar espacios físicos en la nueva normalidad. Y a continuación, Supply Chain, cadena de suministros de la industria médica global, estado actual, retos y oportunidades. Al finalizar, otra actividad complementaria a cargo de JLL sobre Integrated Facility Management. Los esperamos. Muchas gracias.